Today's episode of Dominaria's Judgment is brought to you by StarCityGames.com, which is hosting a truly legendary sale this week. Until Tuesday, June the 1st at 10:59am, you can get 15% off all legendary creatures at StarCityGames.com/sale. If you want to try out a new commander, give that commander some help in the 99, or pick up something new for Constructed, we have what you're looking for. And if you're listening to this, you have seen some of the weird and wacky legends from Modern Horizons 2. We'll be talking about those and the rest of the set today in this episode, and pre-orders for that set are just a click away as well. Make sure you go to StarCityGames.com/sale.
This week's Dominaria's Judgment is also brought to you by Coalesce Apparel, the #1 store for Magic the Gathering inspired apparel. Take a look at their t-shirts, hoodies, stickers, and just general stylings at coalesceapparel.shop. Then use gift code SCG at checkout to save 10% on your entire order. And seriously, I want to emphasize that sticker part. Shirts are cool, but you can send a targeted message with a sticker. Slap it on your deck box if it matches your commander, or if you really want to get inventive, find a way to slap the 3x4 sticker on your 2.5x3.5 Magic card, maybe with a sleeve, maybe with a hard case. You're inventive people, you'll find a way to make it work. So, take a look at coalesceapparel.shop, check out their product lines like Wooburg Forever and Ravnica University, and see what catches your eye. Remember, use gift code SCG at checkout to save 10%. Coalesce Apparel and Design. No one made what they wanted, so they made it themselves.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Dominaria's Judgment, a weekly modern podcast brought to you by StarCityGames.com and hosted by me, Dom Harvey, along with Ari Lax, and we have a lot to get to today. Modern Horizons 2 previews are in full swing, and it's only Tuesday in this week so far, and we have had a whole lot dropped on us that we're keen to sink our teeth into. But I guess before we do that, we'll briefly touch on where the format is right now, at least for the next two or 3 weeks. And this format, it feels like people have mostly figured out by this point.
Yeah. And I think it's even shorter than that. I actually think this set releases, so 7-ish days from now is when this set's going to drop. Wow. Something like that. Yeah, I think it might be next Thursday. So we're basically at the tail end of what's going on in Modern right now.
I believe the paper release date has been pushed back a little bit, but the Magic Online release date is, I think, June the 3rd or at the very start of June. And yeah, that is hurtling towards us at a frightening speed. And I am very excited for whatever that day is when people can finally get their hands on the virtual copies, at least, of these new cards. And I'm going to sit back with as many Twitch streams as my new laptop can support at that time and just soak it all in and maybe try and fire a stream up myself. Who knows?
Yeah, I think, you said things are kind of getting to solved. We didn't get a ton of deck lists this weekend just due to it looks like it's some kind of upload bug with Magic Online. You were saying that regularly happens with the showcases, but we did get the results from the showcase, and it was basically all is it Delver. How many of the top 8 decks is it Delver? 4, 5, something like that.
Has it been upgraded from Prowess to Delver now, or is that a statement about its guiding philosophy?
You are correct. It has not received any Delver secrets, but it feels like about the same deck at this point. It's, the cheap disruption, the card draw, it's just kind of in this format. Just because of the way the disruption works, you aren't really looking to do the 2-for-1 style trades that the traditional Delver decks are trying to do, just because you can't choke your opponent's mana. You're just trying to actually kill them. That's how you're choking their mana is ending the game, and you send a lightning bolt to their face or whatever.
And this deck is scarily good at ending the game on turn 3, turn 4, through at least one piece of removal. That's just a very consistent thing that happens. But yeah, it is funny how in every other format, the blue-based tempo deck is known as Delver, because that is the flagship card, the flagship threat, and whether it's Pauper, Legacy, if you have played those formats, you have died to a lot of turn 1 Delvers, and Delver has just, I think, never actually been good in Modern, and this was before cards like Lava Dart appeared on the scene, but I think if you are coming to Modern, let's say from a Legacy perspective, your first impulse is, oh, surely Delver must be good in this format, and hey, why don't these aggressive Prowess decks play Delver? Turns out the card is just not good in Modern, and maybe there's going to be something in Modern Horizons 2 that's going to change that. And I don't say that in any kind of oblique sense of, oh, wait until you see what we've got today. I haven't seen a card yet that is going to make me revisit that assumption. But for now, and for the foreseeable future at least, although that may age very poorly over the course of this previous season, Delver's just not a very good card, it turns out.
Yeah, without Brainstorm, the card gets a lot worse. Without Ponder, the card gets a lot worse. And Modern has neither
Shocking.
of those. And we have Brainstone, but that doesn't count.
Sure doesn't, yeah. But in this showcase, the finals that were split was between two copies of Is It Prowess, and one of those was Sam Rolfe, who won the PTQ the previous weekend with Is It Prowess. And so he continues to put up incredible results. And the sign of the deteriorating health of a format is usually when these single deck specialists or these archetype specialists, which you see very often in Modern, start picking up what they perceive to be the best deck. So we saw BMJ with some underscores in there. No one ever knows how many. Ben Jones, a Death Shadow specialist for many years now, just picking up Prowess because that's what you have to do, it seems, to work his way into that top 8 as well. And most scary of all, McWinsource, Tom White, another English player on who is usually seen singing some kind of blue-based control deck, just picking up the Goblin Guides and the burn spells for burn in his case, and just rocking that to good finishes as well. So that's where the format is at this point. Even the people who love playing all manner of these weird other decks are coalescing around what seems to be by far the best deck at this point.
Yeah, it does make me happy to see relatively few companions in these top 8 lists, and by relatively I mean actual 0 as far as I can tell. You got some 5-color Scape Shift, Amulet Titan, Red Green, Gruul Ponza. Those decks are not traditionally companion decks, and it's kind of nice to see a little less Lurrus, a little less Yorion around. They somehow still keep becoming problems, and I don't quite know why or how to stop it.
I am very glad that this is a Prowess deck because of Storming Entity technically costing double blue, although you're never actually paying that here. It means you can't free roll Gigantha and get into that incredibly tiresome conversation of, well, is the 5% of games in which I get to cast Gigantha worth that 15th sideboard slot? The answer is always yes, but that conversation comes up over and over again, and it's one that, it's never fun to have.
No. Gigantha is, I think at this point, probably the most defensive one to see on a deck list, just because the person that's just there because they can,
And it's not impressive, which I guess if it was impressive and you didn't have to work for it, that would be an even bigger problem. But at least when you see something like Obosh, that some real sacrifices are being made to work that one in there. I guess the companion which you don't have to sacrifice for and which is incredibly good is just Lurrus. And that's why that card is a menace in every format that it's been legal in, even under this new companion rule. Yeah,
it's, it has been unbanned in a format for now. For now.
No promises on the long-term future of that, but we'll see. But I think that about covers it, honestly, for the results of current Modern, Strixhaven Modern. So nothing new to report there, although we will make up for it with a truly barnstormer edition of Nonsense of the Week later on. So you will want to stick around for that one, to be sure. But I think for now, let's get into what we're all here for, and that's some Modern Horizons 2 spoilers.
Yeah. Let's dive right in and get through at least this first section of Squirrels.
Yeah, so we are starting off here, as all things must do, with Squirrels. And to this point, there has been a notable lack of Squirrels in Modern, and really the only set that made even a gesture at fixing that was the first Modern Horizons, where we get Deep Forest Hermit as this update of Deranged Hermit, which has suddenly become obscenely expensive now, as all cards from that era eventually do. But there's never been anything close to a Squirrel tribal deck of any sort, or really just any individual Squirrel cards that have made an impact, and this set is doing its bit to fix that.
Yeah, we did see Scurrid Colony as a plant in Strixhaven, so, a little bit of future seeding. Okay.
Sure. So I guess we'll start with the big kahuna when it comes to Squirrels, and that's Chatterfang. I'll make sure I get the full name up here. So this is the Squirrel Lord, so to speak. It's not directly pumping Squirrels. It's really more of a kind of token payoff. There's Anointed Procession of sorts stapled to a card, which has some tribal tie-in with its other ability. But this is I'm going to say the flagship Squirrel of the set so far.
Yeah. So Chatterfang, for those who haven't seen it, 2 and a green, 3/3 Forest Walk. Black, sacrifice X squirrels, target creature gets plus X minus X until end turn. And I kind of left the abilities out of order because I wanted to focus on this last ability or middle ability on the card. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, uh, create those tokens plus that many 1/1 squirrel tokens instead, which is weirdly unique. I don't. We've gotten doubling before all the time, but I don't. And we've gotten replacement like Divine Visitation from Guild of Ravnica, but I don't know if we've gotten the kind of double up where you can create some arbitrary number of non-creature tokens through whatever means, and then convert those into something tangible.
Yeah, so it's unique in two ways. Not just the type of scroll that it's creating, which those of you who have a stash of Brian Gottlieb scroll tokens from StarCityGames.com can finally make some good use of those in paper, but also just in its function as well as its form, I suppose, where, like you said, we're not doubling, we're not kind of doing anything that we have a precedent for. It's more like matching, I suppose.
Yeah. So my initial thought was, what is the best way to make a billion food tokens or treasure tokens or something where your buy-in cost might be minimized? And I don't think there's something that like lets you sacrifice creatures to directly make food tokens repeatedly, like Witch's Oven is capped at once a turn or whatever. If I miss that, then that would be an infinite combo where you just get to loop that. But that's the kind of stuff I think you should be looking for if you're trying to play this card, is abusing that Squirrel's token addition conversion ability.
Yeah, I think basically everything, as far as I can tell, is gated either by one of the pieces tapping to activate or some kind of mana cost at some point in that cycle. So you can never go fully infinite. If you have enough mana to sink into it, then you can get a board that grows out of control pretty quickly. But I don't know if that's really a good axis to be finding on, because we've seen decks like Elves, for example, where that is their explicit plan, just make a lot of power and hope that that's good enough. And generally those are better at it than any kind of finite implementation of this is going to be. And then there are a lot of decks in the format that just don't care. You can make as many cute squirrels as you want, and then you will just lose on their next turn anyway when they get to do their thing. But on the basis of a quick Scryfall search, which there will be some quick Scryfall searches and a lot of quite lengthy and involved Scryfall searches during this preview season, I imagine. The things that stood out to me were, Coney Garden Gingerbread Cabin as lands that are semi-free rolls in your mana base if you can support them, which can make tokens immediately. Gilded Goose as a one-drop accelerant, which can continue making tokens over the course of the game and brings one with it for free, because notably, it's not when you make a creature token, you get a squirrel. It's when you make a token of any sort. So food qualifies, treasure tokens qualify, clues, if you've got a tireless tracker, or we know that Investigate is coming back in some capacity in the set. So we can look out for that. And then just some of the generic green-white creature stuff, like Clarion Spirit stood out to me. If you go Clarion Spirit into this and then maybe a Mishra's Bauble or something, you get a Spirit, then you get a Squirrel, and maybe then you get to convoke out something else and keep that going. Voice of Resurgence, which I don't think has aged very well in Modern at all, but maybe you can consider that. And then two of these weird artifacts from the very start of Modern's life cycle, Spawning Pit and Genesis Chamber. So Genesis Chamber is whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, its controller creates a 1/1 mirror token. And then Spawning Pit is sacrifice a creature to put a charge counter, and then you could pay one and remove 2 charge counters to make a 2/2 token. So those are ways where you can shuffle these resources, convert them back and forth quite efficiently.
Yeah, this is inherently a do-nothing loop with Pitiless Plunderer, which is 3 and a black for a 1/4 pirate. Human pirate, whenever a creature you control dies, make a treasure. So you make a treasure, you make a squirrel, you pay a black to sack that squirrel to this. To Chatterfang with its last ability, your squirrel dies, you make a new treasure. So you get to kill all their stuff and have infinite death triggers for everything else. But I don't think that's quite enough. Like a 3-card bad Splinter Twin ain't cutting it.
Yeah, the only other thing that came to mind was Zombie Infestation, actually, where that is a free repeatable source of making tokens. It turns out that repetition only goes so far because you run out of cards before too long. But if you have another way, a third card that converts tokens into cards, then maybe there's something there. But I think too many moving pieces for this to be a serious play in Modern. But I think if it shows up, it's going to be as a payoff Lord of sorts in just some kind of finite, fair-ish token strategy.
Sounds right to me.
Yeah. But let's move on to a smaller role-playing Squirrel, if you like. This is Ravenous Squirrel. It's a 1-drop. It costs black-green hybrid, so can fit in lots of different color combinations. This is a 1/1. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact or creature, put a +1/+1 counter on Ravenous Squirrel, and then it has 1 black-green, sacrifice an artifact or creature, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So this stands out to me because these scalable 1-drops are often a good starting point for some kind of, in the case of something like Champion of the Parish, that is explicitly a tribal strategy. With this, you're not trying to build tribal squirrels, although, hey, God bless you if you are. But I think this could fit in some kind of very heavy, aristocrats or sacrifice style deck. I have been thinking for a while that there should be some kind of fair use for Carrion Feeder in Modern. And I was thinking maybe there's like a Hardened Scales kind of deck with Carrion Feeder and the Undying creatures like Young Wolf. Maybe you have Yawgmoth as like a fair top ender in that deck, and this could fit in seamlessly there.
There's actually a Pauper deck that does what you're thinking of. It involves Mortician Beetle, which already was in Modern, but it doesn't have the flexible cost of this. It's just black whenever a creature is sacrificed, put a counter on it. The Pauper deck has access to Carrion Feeder and Mortician Beetle through some random Masters set, and it does a lot of the stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, so that's a good place to look for inspiration. And that second ability is a really nice hedge where if you open the game with this, it can grow to large proportions quite quickly. And then if you draw this on turn 5, turn 6, where you have some mana lying around, it's not just a dead 1/1 now. You actually get to start kind of going off and converting resources and doing your thing.
Yeah. Maybe it's time for Fecundity to make a comeback.
I sure hope so, yeah. Let's move on to, I guess, do we have any other squirrels that we want to touch on briefly?
No, I had some nonsense that I really don't think is worth continuing on. So let's go on to Rise and Shine. It's a 1 and a blue sorcery with Overload, 4 and a blue. So you can overload it and target a bunch of things at once. And it is target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact and put 4 +1/+1 counters on each artifact that became a creature this way. So 1 in a blue, you get a 4/4 out of one of your artifacts. So a bit worse than in Soul. And 4 in a blue, overload to probably just one-shot your opponent. I only brought this up because it's a interesting finisher that kind of scales low and high in... I've played a lot of these like prison-y decks, and they kind of want these kind of finishers against control as just a way to adjust from being a like ensnaring bridges and do nothing deck against Cryptic Command to actually trying to win the game. And I think that this one is, I don't know if it's better. Like Urza Saga certainly looks to be better along this axis, but this does something slightly different along those lines and is competing for some space with like Tezzeret, Asian Ebolas, but just another card along those lines worth noting.
Yeah, I think just as a 2-mana card, it is substantially worse than Installed Artifact, which, usually you're aiming to put that on a Darksteel Citadel, let's say, or maybe Mox Opal in a previous life. But in terms of something like Affinity, where it would show up from time to time, just being able to suit up a Signal Pest or a Vault Scourge with the built-in invasion was a big deal there, and you can't do that with this card. Also, I think a 4/4 as a 5-turn clock is a lot more than a 5/5 as a 4-turn clock. I think that does make a big difference there. And then it's tough to imagine the deck that just has enough fodder lying around that you can one-shot with this, even when you do get up to 6 mana. Like, maybe there is some kind of Urza deck or some prison deck that wants to be able to pivot, but I think for that role, something like the Antiquities War is going to be better, where, you pay that on 4. On the turn where you would get to 6, then that saga is going to ultimate with the final chapter. But in the meantime, you're finding your lock pieces, you're kind of casting Dig Through Time, essentially, in your artifact deck. So I think that's where you would want to look for that effect.
Yeah, very possible the Antiquities War is just a better version of this card. It is just nice to have another one of these in the toolbox, I think.
Yeah, so let's move on to Wonder. So this is a new to modern reprint, joining its friend Genesis in the modern format, which we got in the first Modern Horizons and has shown up basically nowhere. And that's a sad sign of the times. Like I remember the days of the mid 2000s when I was getting into Magic, and you would see a lot of gifts ungiven for Genesis and 3 other cards, and that was actually a realistic endgame that you could build towards, and that is just not how modern Magic is played anymore. And you see Genesis being cut from cubes left and right. It's not a great time to be that card. And I actually think that the uncommon, as they appeared in Judgment, those incarnations like Wonder, like Anger, which would also be a really big pickup if that appears in this set, those might actually be more relevant in this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely. There is one of them already in the format via the time shifted sheet in original Time Spiral, but it's Valor, the one that gives first strike. Wonder.
Oh, hold on. Are you saying that the white card is by far the worst of the cycle?
No, that might be the black one that gives Swamp Walk or something. I'd have to look. I think the green one gives Trample. They're all kind of dicey.
I
but
mean,
Wonder.
honestly, in Judgment, you would expect the green and the white ones to be good and the black one to be bad, and yet somehow it's the blue and the red ones that are kind of broken.
Yeah, so Wonder has some technical size and game text, but it really just says if this is in your graveyard and you control an island, your creatures gain flying.
Yeah,
that's pretty
so
good.
you can imagine if there is some kind of like a Crabvine, Dredgevine deck, or some adaptation of existing Dredge, which can have an island consistently with these fetch land, shock land mana bases, then yeah, making sure your price amalgams and such can actually get through and not just get blockaded on the ground is pretty big. And that's a kind of free effect that is always looming over the game. And the same way that you think you have the game stabilized, but you just need them to not dredge into 2 Creeping Chills or that final Conflagray or so on. I think Wonder can join that list of, I just need to fade Wonder for 1 turn, and maybe I'll be okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of this card is gated by whether Careful Study ends up in this set, which is a pretty dangerous printing. But if it does, then Wonder is probably going to show up for the ride as just a blue card with your blue spell. But without that card, I think stretching for blue in these graveyard decks, except for the Hedron Crab ones, might be a little bit of a ask.
I think we will get something in that space, but who knows if it's something like Careful Study, and who knows if it's even in blue, right? Because if it's, let's say, a black card or a green card instead, then actually getting an island into those decks maybe is not so easy. So jury's still out on that one, I think. Let's move on to Prismatic Ending. So this is X and white. It's a sorcery with Converge. You exile target non-land permanent if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast this spell. So to visualize that, if you cast it for white, you're hitting a 1-drop. If you cast it for white-blue, you're hitting a 2-drop, and so on and so forth. And this is an interesting addition to Modern in its own right, and also given its timing, where we also know that Portable Hull is coming in the Dungeons & Dragons set before too long. And so between those 2 cards, I don't know how much they are competing for space with each other directly, but with both of them in the mix, white suddenly has a much more versatile removal in Modern now.
Yeah, I've seen Isolate show up in a number of lists, and this card seems like, aside from the sorcery versus instant debate, like it's set up to really supplant it there. And just like the ability to flex up and kill like a Ren and 6 is just so nice with that effect. When you Abrupt, like how often is Abrupt Decay killing a 3-drop versus like this exiling? Like I think this card is in the ballpark of like Abrupt Decay, and it also has got some of the weird engineered explosive stuff where like you cast it for X equals 0, and then the Thalia makes you pay 1 more, and then I think that's how this works. Yes, because it's conditioned. Yes.
Crucially, you can get a chalice on 1 with this. If you have this 1-drop heavy deck, then this is a 1-drop most of the time that's also technically a 2-drop when you need it to be.
Yeah, even without another color. Yeah, I think this card's totally serviceable. I don't think it's going to be like a fatal push or anything, but it's nice.
I think this being a sorcery, compared to Portable Hull, for example, which, if you're pairing that with Emery or Row of Invention, then it's going to have some direct uses there. But for the most part, it's much better for this to be on a sorcery, which isn't contingent on anything staying on the battlefield, compared to Portable Hull, which sometimes, you get their Tarmogoyf, but if they have a Colligan's Command or something, then it's a massive blowout. So it's better on that axis. And then we've mentioned in the past how Lurrus has this weird kind of curve constricting effect on aggro decks in Modern, aside from Blue-Red Prowess, of course, where it makes you play a bunch of 1s and 2s and you don't really go up the curve, but then also you have this incredibly important 3-drop, which is now less important because you're exiling the cards that it's trying to recur. So there is some give and take there, but the fact that this can just trade 3 mana for their Lurrus, which they kind of spent 6 mana on over time, or you can scale this up. If you draw this in the late game, it can get their it might be tough to get like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, or Storming Entity, as always. You need the full rainbow there, but definitely a very good and versatile card for sure.
Yeah. You did mention Kolaghan's Command, so let's move on to a card that is especially vulnerable to it, and that is Sword of Hearth and Home. This is the green-white sword in the allied colored sword cycle, inspired by the enemy color sword cycle, which is inspired by the enemy color sword pair from Darksteel. So it's, +2/+2 protection from green and white, 3 to play, 2 to equip. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, this is what it actually does for the sword. Exile up to 1 target creature you own, then search your library for a basic land, then put both those cards onto the battlefield under your control and shuffle. Notably not tapped, so you're flickering something, putting a basic land in untapped, which is effectively reducing that equip cost. And I kind of went on a rant about not liking the 2 swords in Modern Horizons 1 when we reviewed that set. I think this one is kind of like flawless for what it's doing. It's recognizing that its audience has changed. You're targeting Cube and Commander players with your swords these days. You're not really targeting Modern players. It's pushed so that it might show up in Modern, but really it's kind of like, these are what can you imagine a Commander player wanting to do more? Flicker their thing, make a land. That's perfect. That's every Commander player's dream. They don't want to do anything else besides that. That's the secret. People are going to want this card. It is exciting in a way that the old original swords were. It feels like it's on the power level as opposed to like putting a counter and proliferating or whatever Steel and Sinew did. I really like this card.
Yeah, it's a little unfortunate that if you flicker the thing that it's equipped to, then it comes back and you have to reattach the sword, but that's not a mistake or something that's counterintuitive. That's just a cost that you have to pay. And usually, if you have a good flicker target, you're going to be fine doing that. I do like that this avoids the problem that a lot of pushed equipment has, and certainly, Sword of Fire and Ice in its heyday had this. At its most extreme, you had Umazawa's Jitte, where basically every creature deck would put it in its sideboard, if only because under the old legend rule, you needed this seal of Jitte for your opponent's copies because they would also just suit up anything they could and then mow down everything they could once they got those counters. But there's often this issue of you don't really care what you're putting it on, and at this point, your creatures don't really have relevant text boxes, and so Sam Black has waxed eloquent on how in Limited things like equipment and combat tricks and various other like mass pump effects or single pump effects ask for different things from your creatures. But once you get to a certain power level, certainly with equipment, it just becomes about have any kind of warm body, put the sword on it, put the Jitte on it, and just make them deal with it or they lose the game. This doesn't really have that. So it does matter what you put it on, and the game is not over if this gets to connect.
Yeah, that's all really great. I think that, not a real banger for Modern, but a really good design in general.
For sure. Let's move on to Fractured Sanity, which a certain subset of the Modern player base is going to be very happy to see. So this is blue, sorcery. Each opponent mills 14 cards, and then it has cycling 1 and blue. When you cycle this, each opponent mills 4 cards. So a modal spell of sorts, but I don't know how much that modality is really doing for you, because you have to think in your mill deck, which realistically is what this is going in. Like, this is it, right? This is the card that you want, and it's hard to find a card that is better on rate than this. So I guess it would be if you have a bunch of mill, but you need to find that surgical extraction to kind of end the game or snipe their Gaia's Blessing or Emrakul or something that's going to reshuffle stuff back in. But for the most part, if you draw this, then that is what you want. Like, that is the joke.
So I think that you actually missed one of the cases, which is that this card plays really well into the mill hands and matchups where you want to be fatal pushing down all their threats, but also setting yourself up to Into the Story or Visions of Beyond. And the cantrip side of this kind of plays to that. The weird part is that the blue cost on this makes you want to skew towards like a heavier blue mill deck and starts, because this kind of can kick Glimpse the Unthinkable out of your deck, you can start thinking about playing a mill deck that isn't Dimir. I think that's one of the interesting parts of this card. it lets you maybe consider red cards in your mill deck or something like that. I don't have a great answer, but it exists, and it is certainly interesting to think about.
People joke about mill being this blue burn deck, so to speak, and the issue before is it's much easier to count to 20 than to do the analogous thing in counting to 50 something in most games. And we are seeing more and more mill cards where you actually get into kind of similar territory now, where this is a quarter of their deck at the very least. Glimpse of Unthinkable is at least a fifth of their deck, if not more. Archive Trap, if you get to cast that for free, that's a phenomenal rate. So once you stack all of these on top of each other, it actually becomes pretty easy to just mill the opponent out with not that many resources and not that many total cards.
Yeah, this is actually more than Boros Charm. Compared to a normal library size, this is closer to like 6 damage, basically, with cards that they've drawn and everything. So
yeah,
it's pretty powerful for the rate. Again, the problem is that Kozilek exists and is a single card that you can put in a deck and is a big problem for mill. But the more powerful mill decks, I guess, the more powerful mill gets, the more opposing decks will have a 14-card sideboard.
Yeah, I do wonder if you mentioned maybe moving away from black towards some kind of mono blue deck. Sanity grinding was a fan favorite many years ago. So this was the triple blue Chroma, the precursor to Devotion, where you would reveal the top 10 cards of your library, count the blue Devotion there, and then mill your opponent for that amount. And this plays perfectly in there. We've got the triple blue casting cost, and now you can artificially raise that count through stuff like Seagate Restoration or some other means. So maybe that kind of fits in that space now too?
Very possible. The Seagate Restoration thing was not something I had thought of. I think you may have to do a lot of blue mana symboling to make your sanity grindings average out to be even close to this card. But I haven't done the math in a decade.
Yeah, I'm sure someone will be motivated to do that math. So in due time, we will credit them for their work. But for now, moving on to Sarah's Emissary is the next card on this list. And I'll let you read this one off.
Yeah, this is 4 white, 7/7 flying. As it enters the battlefield, choose a card type. You and creatures you control have protection from the chosen card type. So if you choose creatures, all your creatures can't be blocked, can't be dealt damage by creatures, all that good stuff. Instant sorceries, you can protect them from one or the other on removal. I don't really think this is going to sub in for Iona anywhere, but it is something that's kind of really big in the format in a unique way. I also want to say I really like the sketch art on this one. If you look at it, it's like kind of like an impressionist style painting as opposed to the other sketch art, which is like really sketchy. I don't know how to describe the difference because I'm not like an art expert, but yeah, I do want to say I do like that part of the card.
Yeah, we didn't even mention the alternate art for Fracture Sanity, which Drew Tucker making his glorious return to Magic with the kind of very, I don't know if abstract is even the right word, but very Tarkarian art that he is known for. So yeah, the art certainly seems to be a big hit across the board from this set as well. Going back to Sarah's Emissary, this is the kind of thing which in a Legacy Reanimated deck, like maybe this comes out for Blazing Archon or something, or this finds a very specific use case. I don't know, firstly, how we're getting this into play in Modern, maybe more on that in a little bit, but also what we want this against and like what we're planning to name. I'm just not sure where this is meant to show up.
Yeah, it looks a lot like Iona, but it's not actually going to lock anyone out of the game in the same way it would. Iona would.
Right. Let's talk about a card that certainly could lock some people out of the game, but maybe not who you would expect. Void Mirror, Ari.
Yeah, Void Mirror is quite the fun one. I think the people over on the vintage side of things are going to be having the absolute most fun with this card. It's a 2-mana artifact. Whenever a player casts a spell, if no colored mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. So this will counter artifacts cast with colorless mana. It'll counter spells cast without paying any mana.
It will counter your opponent's entire Eldrazi Tron deck unless they have a route around that. But even in that example, which I think is the most extreme use case, there are adaptations that can be made. So, Cavern of Souls, for example, can make colored mana to force your Eldrazi through, or just stop it from being countered. So kind of getting back at this card on two axes there. And then you can always do things like put black, colorless Painlands, like Sulphurous Springs or something, in your deck to map for if you want to have something to get around this, or your Urborg, you can find a copy of that for that card in your mana paste. somewhere. So there is counterplay to this, but it is kind of an uninteresting deck building puzzle where if no one's playing this card, you shouldn't be doing those things, and then you run into the one person who is playing this card, and you don't even feel like you made a mistake, but you know you're getting punished for it anyway.
I think Blast Zone is the land that interests me most in resolving this because it kind of solves that issue of like, I'm not putting a Sulphurous Spring into my deck to do this because I don't really care. Like, I'm going to put Blast Zone in my deck regardless because it's just going to be good against everybody and it'll just happen to take out this random hate card along the way.
Yeah, I've seen people be very excited about using this against Greentron, where, Friendship ended with Damping Sphere. Now Void Mirror is my best friend, but I don't know if that's going to work out the way you want all the time, because if they have a Chromatic Sphere or Chromatic Star in play, they can use that to make colored mana of any color and then get to resolve their next spell. And then if that spell is, let's say, a Sylvan Scrying or a Expedition map that lets them find a forest, now that forest can help them cast, Karn Liberated or whatever their payoff card is. So this definitely will slow them down most of the time, and it forces them to, have something specific going on, and sometimes this will just ice the game on the spot and buy you infinite time. But this isn't a kind of instant I win button in the way that people maybe were assuming at a glance when they read the card.
It's Greentron. Green is in the name. It's not tricky math here.
Yeah, don't even get us started on Bluetron, which is very resistant to this card. But what I will say is this is a type of card which kind of tricks people into sideboarding in where they shouldn't. And I don't mean I think this card is gangbusters against Greentron when it isn't. I mean, my opponent has some kind of free spell in their deck, so I'm going to put this in my own deck. So, against, let's say, Amulet Titan, yeah, okay, this can shut off Summoner's Pact, but if that's all it's doing, you do need to really seriously question if that's worth, putting this card in your deck, having to draw the card, having to resolve the card, taking off a turn maybe with 2 mana to do that. If you're jumping through all these hoops, you need this card to be doing a lot. There's just no chance of the Void, where sometimes you play it for free on turn 1 and it cripples the opponent's entire draw.
Yeah. And I think that anytime we mention Bluetron, it's time to sit back and take stock of what's going on. So with that, we're going to kick it over to an ad break. Let us collect our thoughts and continue on with some cards that maybe don't make us talk about playing Condescendent format. If you are looking to sell your Magic the Gathering cards, it's never been easier than with StarCityGames.com. Make the best of our 30% store credit bonus and the fastest turnaround time in the industry when you use any of our 4 simple ways to sell located at StarCityGames.com/sell. You can check out our buy list, box up your cards and send them our way with the ship and sell program. Come on into the Star City Game Center in Roanoke, Virginia for that personal touch. Or if you have everything, 500,000 cards, you want to store and you want to do some bulk, we'll come to you. And seriously, when we're talking about these large collections, Star City does mean they will come to you. The list of places goes from Ohio to New Jersey and elsewhere. Like, seriously, I've driven from Ohio to New Jersey. That is not a short drive. So head on over to StarCityGames.com/sell, that's SELL, for more details on all these great options, and maybe clear up a little space in your life for your next project, even if that happens to just be even more Magic cards or another Commander deck.
And we're back, and let's kick off this segment with a card which is kind of from the same era from Condescend when we go back and check the history books, and that's Patriarch's Bidding, a card which I kind of assumed at some point was in Modern already, and I've definitely caught myself starting a few deck lists with some of these new to Modern cards, only to realize that they weren't actually new to Modern yet, that they had not been in Modern the entire time. And so it's nice to have Patriarch's Bidding in the mix finally. Do you think after, close to 20 years after its debut that it still has what it takes there?
I think it's kind of a tough ask when Rally the Ancestors and Return to the Ranks haven't made it in the format, but the color difference, again, does matter a lot. It lines up with Goblins is the big one, as it always has. So the trick is kind of, you cast this card, you've set up a bunch of Goblins that have died, your opponent dies to Sling Game Lieutenant. Ta-da.
Yeah, so for the whippersnappers out there, we should quickly recite the text here. So this is 3 black for a sorcery. You and your opponent, I guess all of your opponents, each choose a creature type, and then each player returns all creatures of the type they chose from their graveyard to the battlefield. So there is a potentially dangerous symmetry here sometimes. If you're putting this card in your deck, you have to think that you can use this better than your opponents can, but there will be some use cases where you just can't afford to cast this because what your opponent's returning is going to be dangerous for you. And The most frustrating example of that is Plague Engineer, once again, as always, where a lot of these small tribal decks, so to speak, where you have these synergistic pieces, they already do not want to face off against Plague Engineer, but even if you discard it, or even if you kill it, that thing is coming right back into play with your own Patriarch spinning. So there's no real getting around that one.
I mean, you can return a Lord with this.
Yeah.
I do want to make one clarification. It returns all creatures of all types chosen, which has come up in the past. I don't know quite the circumstances here, but previously the thing was you would cycle Gem Palm Incinerator to kill their goblins, and then cycle Eternal Dragon, and then you'd get back your goblins and dragons. So that's another thing to watch out for. This has some like weird living end style issues where some stuff can get lopsided real fast that way.
Yeah, this is an interesting example of a tribal payoff where its utility doesn't really scale with the popularity of the tribe in question. So humans, for example, there are certainly enough humans in Modern that you could build a humans bidding deck, and I'll get into some of those in a second, but it's going to look very unlike the conventional, 5-color aggressive humans deck that we've seen in Modern over the years. Or likewise, elves, for example, popular tribe, getting more and more tools every year, poised maybe to make a big splash in Modern, but that is just not the kind of deck that can use Patriarch bidding effectively, because you're not binning your own elves, and it's hard to just end up with a bunch of elves in the graveyard. Whereas some of these smaller tribes, like zombies or Zubera bidding, I know has been a fun casual strategy across the years. Tribes like that, these kind of more marginal tribes, actually make better use of this card sometimes.
Yeah. You don't normally put sacrifice stuff into your tribal deck because you're usually trying to build a synergy that involves controlling a bunch of creatures of the tribe, but this kind of sets that all up.
Yeah, so as you said, the level 1 example is Goblins, where we don't have Goblin Sledder, but we do have Skirk Prospector, which, if there's one thing that's going to bring fecundity back to Modern, that might actually be it. But also just as a way of bidding all of your goblins while making sure that your bidding then converts into something. So let's say you get Skirk Prospector, a bunch of other goblins, maybe some of those have enters the battlefield effects. You can now cast the cards that you're drawing, or you can activate your Pashalik Mons or so on. So you've got Skirk Prospector, you've got Morg War Marshal for that strategy. Like I said, Pashalik Mons, and then Slaying Lieutenant is the big one. So this is from the first Modern Horizons, 3 in a black, 1/1 goblin. When it comes in, you create 2 more goblins, and then you can sacrifice a goblin, including itself, crucially, to drain the opponent for 1. So you can set up these very big finishes, these 1-turn kills where you sacrifice a bunch of stuff, you're bidding it all back, and now each goblin you sack is draining the opponent for at least 1 while also doing something else in the meantime.
Yeah, the traditional way you would do this in Standard was Goblin Sharpshooter, so maybe we'll see that one show up in one of the new to modern reprint things. I don't know what the exact name for those is off the top of my head, but you can create some layered pings that way. Sling Gang alone is a lot of damage. You can fit the Conspicuous Snoop Bogart Harbinger combo into this deck already with Kiki Jiki and just kind of have bidding as this big finish. There's a lot of stuff you can do within this archetype.
Yeah, in general, I would say the 2 things you want to do with bidding are either have this free-ish, repeatable sacrifice effect to flood the board with whatever the tribe is and then sacrifice them all in one go, or get some kind of global haste, global pump effect so that you can just immediately swing for lethal. Goblins has that, of course, in the form of Goblin Chieftain, Goblin War Chief, and so on. Leaning more on the sacrifice side of things, there's zombies, where we have Carrion Feeder, we have Undead Augur from the first Modern Horizons. You have black for a 2/2 zombie. Whenever it or another zombie dies, you draw a card and you lose a life. So you can really go off and draw a bunch of cards that way. You have a bunch of like Digraph Captain, Plague Belcher style effects to drain when you sacrifice stuff. Citrus Supplier if you want to load the graveyard up in advance. But I'm not really seeing the engine pieces necessarily to make it work for zombie bidding in Modern. One tribe that actually could do that angle better is humans, like I said, where we've had Angel of Glory's Rise show up in various obscure decks across the years, but this is a much more castable version of that effect. You don't have to jump through hoops to even get there. And so in Modern, you have some great sacrifice outlets. You've got Cartel Aristocrat, Priest of Forgotten Gods, Taser Orzhov Scion for the OG Ravnica fans out there, or OG Guild Pact, I suppose. Yorgmoth, Thran Physician, as maybe the best sacrifice outlet of that sort in the entire format. You've got other stuff like Ranger Captain of Eos, which can fetch something up, like the Carrion Feeder, and also sacrifice itself. And then you also have a bunch of stuff that are humans that reward you for sacrificing. So Zulaport Cutthroat as your kind of human blood artist in there. Taser, being the sack outlet and the payoff at the same time. Judith, the Flip Liliana. There's a lot of stuff if you want to go deep in the weeds on the Scryfall search there.
Yeah, this is the deck specifically that makes me wonder why it didn't exist with Rally or Return to the Ranks. Because you're already talking about all these white humans. But the other decks, the color lines up a little differently. And maybe it's just you want to cast this and have tangible value when you just have a short combo.
Mm-hmm. And so on the other side of things, where the goal is something that gives everything haste, and then a bunch of big things that share a creature type with that. We have dragons as a more casual one, where like Dragonlord Colligan or Karthus, and then you just whatever medley of dragons you want, whatever menagerie of dragons you have can be paired with those. And then a bit of a boomer nostalgia throwback here, elemental bidding, which back in the day in 2005 in Extended was bidding back like Living Hive and Thorn Elemental, and then Flamekin Zealot was the recent printing at that time, which pushed that deck into viability, where that would give all your elementals +1/+1 and haste. And there are much better elementals now, and much better versions of Flamekin Zealot if you want to go down that route, including the free evoke elementals that bin themselves from this very set.
Yeah, notable, only ever doing fair things, absolutely never doing anything unfair, Flamekin Zealot.
Of course.
Definitely has gone on the stack once in its life.
People have cast that one in Limited, I'm sure. But then also pairing both sides of that spectrum, the kind of sack aspect and the haste and God knows what else, we have Slivers, which may actually be the most exciting application of this card, where you have Cloud Treader Sliver as the haste sliver of choice, I imagine. You have Basil Sliver from Time Spiral, so this is 2 and a black. All your slivers get sacrifice this sliver, add double black to your mana pool. So that gives you a big thing that can cast bidding from a small board quite quickly. So let's say you go, 1 cost sliver into Gemhide Sliver or Manaref Sliver, where all your slivers tap for mana, into Basil Sliver. That's 8 mana on that turn. Once you tap your slivers, you bin your board, and then maybe you're casting more slivers, you're casting a bidding. So you could really make a lot of stuff happen very quickly there.
Yeah, Basil Sliver is a interesting mana engine for sure. And you've noted Dregscape Sliver with Basil Sliver is just kind of another interesting loop generation sort of setup.
That's the one that has Unearth and gives all of your slivers Unearth for 2 as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely into some of this stuff.
There's Darkheart Sliver, so sacrifice each of your slivers to gain 3 life. Necrotic Sliver, like once you made a bunch of mana, you just gun down everything that's on the opposing battlefield there. So a lot of cool stuff going on. I'm excited to see what people can do with that angle.
Yeah. What if you're more into reanimating exactly one creature? How's that sound? What do we got for that?
Okay, I'm in. What do you have in mind?
Okay, what about Priest of Fell Rites? This is white-black for a human warlock. It's a 2/2. Tap, pay 3 life, sacrifice this as a sorcery only. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And this has Unearth of 3 white-black. So it's kind of a mix of like Doom Necromancer and Unburial Rites, just at a slightly better rate. Yeah, it does some interesting stuff. Can't use it with Emrakul because of the sorcery speed, but you can return things more along the lines of like Iona, Tidespout Tyrant, a slow Gristlebrand, but still a Gristlebrand.
Yeah, it's a slow Gristlebrand, and you've already paid 3 life for this, so this card does have some obvious safeguards built into it. I think they know what kind of shenanigans people would want to do with this if they had their druthers. But this is a really interesting card, and typically these decks that try to cheat in one big creature don't rely on small creatures themselves, and so cards like Lightning Bolt and Fatal Push are kind of ineffective. And I like that this opens up some of that broken potential, but in a way that's very easy to answer with cards that just belong in your deck anyway.
Yeah. You've noted it's good with the Evoke Elementals, both because it returns them, but it's also 2 colors. So you can stitch together Grief with Ephemerate pretty well in these colors, or the White Elemental.
Oh, yeah.
The to be determined White Elemental with black cards. Yeah. Multiple colors, powerful ability.
I wrote about the 5 stages of grief for my article on MTG this week, and one interaction that I highlighted in there was Malakir Rebirth specifically, but this whole class of kind of cheap black spells that give your creature undying or return it to the battlefield when it dies. And Malakir Rebirth is, I think, the best of those because you can just fold that one into your mana base, and that's something which can protect your priest. It can kind of buy back your priest for second use. But as you mentioned, Grief in particular, excellent with this card because it's a good thing to return the bins itself sometimes, and also if you are aiming higher with this card, Grief can kind of clear the way. A free discard spell that can nab their removal spell to make sure your priest gets to untap.
Also, priest is inherently card advantage. You're going to reanimate something and reanimate another thing later on the unearth. So when you're already grinding your opponent's resources down with Grief, that sounds like a pretty good way to kind of wrap things up.
Mm-hmm. In terms of more combo applications for this card, one fringe deck I've been looking at for a while is the kind of Vesperlark, Revelark combo with Body Double, where this is a nice way to, it's a good thing to return with Revelark. It's a good way to kind of stitch all of those pieces together there in conjunction with something like an Altar of Dementia or Carrion Feeder as a sacrifice outlet. I did also wonder, Orzhov in this set is a Reanimator color pair, which means you're going to get some good reanimation in mono white, and we've already seen the Breath of Life with the Rhino and the Elephant that makes a food, and that's a really sweet card. It did make me think, in the same vein as we had Deranged Hermit becoming Deep Forest Hermit, could we get a Karmic Guide in a new skin here?
You could literally get Karmic Guide. That's the problem with Deranged Hermit, is that it's on the reserve list. And Karmic Guide is somehow not... They kind of just threw things at a dartboard and said you can never have these again. And one of those was not Karmic Guide, and one of those was Deranged Hermit. So, yeah, you may in fact see literal Karmic Guide showing up.
Yeah, we may get Karmic Guide, we may get Karmic Guide at home, we may get a better Karmic Guide. We don't know yet. But anything in that space is worth a look, and Priest is going to slot nicely into those decks. The other thing that I did wonder is, what if this is weirdly better in a fair deck? Because we had that Esper Goya's Vengeance deck that Lucas Blowon played at the Pro Tour once with Obsidat and Jacevin's Prodigy and so on. And this just returning Obsidat in the early game that's still a very strong line, even if it doesn't have haste right away. And if you're able to surround that with just more fair interactive pieces, then that's a good finish for your mid-range deck.
Yeah, and like I said, again, card advantage built into this card, so that all makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, let's move on to one of the just weirdest and wackiest cards from this set, and this one certainly is Grist to our mill. Get it? It's funny. It's a joke. Whatever. This is Grist, the insect/creature planeswalker here, and I'll make sure I get the card up so I have the full text. This is Grist the Hunger Tide. It costs 1 green black. As long as Grist the Hunger Tide isn't on the battlefield, it's a 1/1 insect creature in addition to its other types. And it starts with 3 loyalty. Its +1 is create a 1/1 insect, then mill a card. If that card is an insect, then you put another loyalty on Grist and repeat that process. Its -2 is you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, destroy target creature or planeswalker. And then the ultimate, the -5, each opponent loses life equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So the floor is yours on this one, Ari.
Yeah, this card looks a lot like Duretti, the Iconoclast, the red-black one that is absolutely bonkers in Cube. Only this is in Modern. And Duretti is in specifically not Modern formats and is still... It's one of those cards that is like overwhelmingly powerful when it's around. I'm really into this. I'm also really into the fact that it's like a weirdly repeatable planeswalker. For example, it is a creature in your graveyard to unearth. It is a creature in your library to collect company into. It just feels like the kind of thing, like the best thing to do with the planeswalker is to keep using it. And this card makes it really, really easy to keep using it on top of already being a good card just in that parallel to Duretti.
Yeah, Duretti it falls in that weird space where it's not quite good enough for the largest format that it's legal in, namely Legacy. But if it was in any of the smaller formats like Pioneer or Historic, people would grow sick of it, very quickly. And this is a better Duretti for the most part, as far as I can tell. It's in a color pair that can do some of those things more consistently, and it is frankly just much easier to have creatures lying around to sacrifice than it is to have random artifacts. As well, Duretti makes one-ones with Defender. Grist, you can attack with these insects. Grist adds to your battlefield in a quite substantial way. And so when we think about that list of obnoxious 3-cast Planeswalkers, Grist is going to be joining that pretty sharpish, I think.
Yeah, I will say the one difference between this card and Duretti is that it's -1 on Duretti versus -2, which does limit the ability of this to just machine gun down all your opponent's stuff. But again, if you're building this card into your deck, you're probably trying to figure out how to recur it with Kolagon's Command, who knows what else. Liliana, Last Hope, just a ton of ways to bring back this creature, Planeswalker, and then cast it as a value for a Planeswalker. This feels a lot like a recurable removal spell that has a ton of additional value, and it's going to be hard to assail this without cutting off the graveyard in a lot of fair matchups.
The fact that your Liliana the Last Hope, your Corrigan's Command can actually return a Planeswalker now makes those effects even stronger. And Grist shooting down opposing Planeswalkers means they are not nearly as safe as they once were. So we mentioned that Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, is weirdly well positioned in current Modern because it just doesn't really die to anything. And this changes that in a big way. Even the biggest and baddest Planeswalkers are not safe. Your Khan Liberateds even, right? And that creates this weird dynamic in Grist mirrors where you want to have the second Grist so that you can play yours, shoot down theirs, and then hopefully defend yours so that you get to untap and keep generating value with it.
Yeah, and I did say graveyard. This is 2 types in that zone for Tarmogoyf, including one weird one. 2 types for Delirium. So Grist can do a lot of stuff on that axis, and I will just caution against the traditional black-green issue where you build all these Golgari threats into your deck and you put all the good ones in, and then you look at your deck and you're like, if my opponent casts Rest in Peace, it kills 12 of my cards. What am I doing here not playing Dredge? And that's been an issue that all of these kind of Inquisition of Kozilek decks have really tried to resolve over the last while. Especially with Wrenn and 6 popping up and just all these things that can get really hampered as soon as your opponent starts attacking your graveyard. It doesn't shut down your whole deck, but if it shuts down more than one of your primary threats and one of your secondary threats or whatever, you really start to look at whether those threats actually are the ones you want or whether you want to downgrade just a little bit to give yourself a little more flexibility and versatility against people turning your deck into something that can lose to a hate card.
Yeah, there is also the issue of decks like this, and this may be actually what has stopped Duretti from breaking through in Legacy, although I have higher hopes for Grist there as well, is that sometimes what you're doing just doesn't matter that much. Like if a spell-based combo of some kind makes a return with this set, or if you're against some really hard control deck that doesn't really care what's going on the battlefield past a certain point, or Primeval Titan strategies typically can just go way over the top of stuff like this. This kind of marginal mana or marginal value generation often is the exact opposite of what Modern is about at any given time. And so just be aware of that, where often you can build a deck that kind of does stuff in this space and it will look a lot better on paper than it plays out in practice.
Yeah, it is easy to fall into the Bloodbraid Elf trap, for sure.
Yes. With that in mind, is the Bloodbraid Elf trap the most natural home for this, or where do you see this actually showing up in the short term?
Yeah, it really does look like a Bloodbraid Elf style card. I guess it could also be an addition to the Yawgmoth decks. It does make sense as something that you can Court of Calling up there if you just want to get some value down the line.
Or especially if one issue that comes up a lot is, let's say your Yawgmoth is off limits for some reason, whether it's Pithing Needle or whatever it may be. Just having an actual big threat that can take over the game is really nice there, and Grist just pairs so well with everything else that your deck is doing. So yeah, could see that for sure. And beyond that, I'm sure people will. I think this card is strong enough that people will find homes to put it in. It's not a case of I'm going to take this card and cut the other 3-mana Planeswalker from my Jund deck for it. Although I'm sure people will do that as well.
Yeah, I am taking a look at the insects in Modern right now, and it's a tough squad. I would
don't worry. I've done that. and no one else, I guess you have already wasted your time. No one listening now needs to waste their time doing that. It's not too much to find there under the stone.
I have exactly one to note, and it's Monstrous Carabid. That's the best one.
Ooh. You're going to feel like a real genius when you, a high roller when you hit that one, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. It is, I would not go down that road. But Grist seems like a pretty good card aside from those things. A card that I don't think is going to see modern play, but I am nonetheless ecstatic to see in the set is Garth One-Eye. This is Wooburg for a 5/5. Well, you know what? Let me just start from the top. I think I already went on this rant about Arena. Do you remember this rant at all? The book Arena, not the program?
I mean, I've heard many rants about Arena, the program, but I don't remember this one.
Oh, well, so Arena is the original Magic the Gathering book, and I think it still holds up as one of the better pieces of Magic the Gathering fiction produced. To this date, even among like all the actual books they produced, like it was one of the best ones through the like 20 years that they were putting out books or whatever. And Garth One-Eye is the main character of it. And the thing that book does so well is that it's a book about, it is a very traditional pulp fantasy book, but the characters are magic wizards, like casting spells from a satchel. And it feels like they are playing games of Magic in an arena. It's really awesome. So this card really hits that on the nose. It is white, blue, black, red, green for a 5/5 legendary creature human wizard. And it has tap, choose a card name that hasn't been chosen from among Disenchant, Brain Geyser, Terror, Shivan Dragon, Regrowth, and Black Lotus. Make a copy of it with of the card with that name. You may cast the copy. You still have to pay the cost on the copy, but like, yeah, I'm here for it. Those seem like some of the most iconic choices outside of putting Ancestral Recall on this card as well.
Yeah, I don't know if it's an intentional or just an inevitable reflection on where Magic was back then, that every other color, and colorless has the most iconic card, but every color has an iconic card that is really associated with it, and then white gets Disenchant, which I guess that might actually be one of the modes you use more often sometimes if you do put this in your deck.
Yes, I also think there may be a specific reference from the book where that occurs. I'd have to reread it, and my copy is like old and falling apart, and like, it's one of those books that I would just have in my GP backpack to read on a plane. It's some good stuff. I would advise the people who get a chance to read it, do so. Definitely worth the time, and the fact that this card made it into a set is awesome.
Yeah, we have had it officially confirmed from Aaron Forsyth that there are no Black Lotus tokens coming up as a result of this card, but that does create an opening for any ambitious content creators over at Star City Games if they ever start doing their, tokens again to maybe work their way into that equation.
I think that's a little, that's really asking, like... The hubris involved in that is really a lot, which means probably at least half of the people writing for us are willing to do it.
I have no shame. I'm willing to admit that. And if, in the past, to get your face on a card, you had to win the Invitational or win the World Championships. And now you can just, have tenure for long enough. Maybe you just get one by default. I don't know how these things work anymore, but something to have as a stretch goal, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay, back to cards that are actually going to see play. You seem to like a specific legendary ooze.
Yeah, I don't quite know how to say this card or what to make of it, but this is Avi, and I don't have the English name in front of me, but this is 2 triple green for a 2/2 legendary ooze. It has Storm, so you create copies of this card, which is a thing you can do with permanents now, as of quite recently. Ave is not legendary if it's a token, so you don't have to worry about all of these copies, which we're about to get to, voiding each other. Ave enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter for each other ooze you control. So to pass the mathematics here, if you have no other oozes to begin with, and why would you? So you play Ave, you make a bunch of Storm copies of it. The first one resolves, you have no other oozes, you get a 2/2. The next one resolves, you have one other ooze, the first copy of Ave, you get a 3/3, and then a 4/4, and then so that cascades down the stack. And so I don't know, it's not like a triangular number, whatever it is. But you see how that scales and it gets out of control pretty quickly. And when you compare that to something like an Envy the Warrens or a Crowstorm, for example, this one scales very, very well. And the main thing holding it back is its weird casting cost. But there are definitely some decks, which we can talk about, where this card is eminently more castable and also much more findable than a card like Envy the Warrens ever could have been.
Yeah. So for what it's worth, whenever something has math that you don't understand about how it's growing, you can just call it exponential growth, and someone in the comments will tell you the actual equation.
It used to be Ben Weiss. I don't know who has officially taken over that role now, but I guess I will find out in short order now.
I'm sure you can just tag him on Twitter with a picture of this card asking if it's exponential growth.
I've aroused his ire, I'm sure, by doing that already, so I'll stay clear from that, I think. But what intrigues me about this card is I remember Zach Allen taking flack after winning an open and, during his high from that, suggesting that at some point Summoner's Pact might have to be banned. I actually think he had a much stronger case than people gave him credit for at the time, and this may be the card that finally tips us over the edge. I don't know, because not only is that interaction just so great on the face of it, right? You have this 0-mana spell that finds your Storm payoff while contributing to it in the process. Those are not going to be the only spells that you cast in that turn, if you have anything to say about it. So you can really run up the score there, and then if you have additional copies of Summoner's Pact, which, eventually you're going to have to pay for all of these, but if you have a way to win right now, then maybe you don't. Then, a Summoner's Pact can find you like a Wild Cantor or something, or depending on the mana engine that you have built into your decks, something that either stays neutral on mana or even nets you mana. And so you can really build up a substantial storm count here. But the other thing too is that most of the Summoner's Pact decks that we've seen in the past, they've always had this inbuilt weakness to counterspells, where you cast your Summoner's Pact, you get your payoff, and then sometimes you have to spend your mana to cast that, let's say a Primeval Titan, and then if that gets countered, you've wasted this turn, and also usually most of your next turn as well. Whereas now, if they let Summoner's Pact resolve, intending to counter that payoff card, if this is the payoff card, then maybe they can counter a copy. If that's what they want to do, they can Ether Gust one of the Storm copies away into the Ether, I suppose. This is a kind of looming threat that that card now always represents.
People are just going to have to start playing Tail's End, just the aspiring spike tech. I'm going to leave my rants about Summoner's Pact for a little bit later on a more appropriate discussion of free cards. But Summoner's Pact is a potential offender. And I think the Storm cards in green are one of the more dangerous points for the card continuing to exist in the format.
There will definitely be some more Summoner's Pact chatter in this episode, don't you worry. So moving on, we have Kitchen Imp, a delightful allusion to Chimney Imp, I want to say, although I don't know if I'm erasing any other imps in that equation there.
I feel like it's a reference to something, but it doesn't make sense for it to be Kitchen Finks, and it doesn't make sense for it to be Chimney Imp 100%. So, yeah, I don't have a good answer.
There was it Daggerclaw Imp, or there was some other imp in Future Sight, but the fact that it's in Future Sight already suggests that some other, heritage is at work there. In any case, this is 3 and a black for a 2/2 flying haste, which doesn't sound appealing on its face. But the kicker, or rather the madness, is madness for a black. So as Jacob Nagro pointed out, this is actually the cheapest madness card that can trigger Vengevine without blowing up the Vengevine in the process. Because we had Big Game Hunter before, which has seen occasional play, in Hollow 1 decks or against Hollow 1 decks. But usually you couldn't use that to set up a Vengevine because of that forced anti-synergy. Whereas now, you get to keep around the Vengevine and double down on that offense because you have this hasty attacker joining the party there.
Yeah, I think it's a lot to ask to line a lot of this stuff up, again, without a careful study or faithless looting. But as soon as something along those lines appears, sign me up.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the verdict as of, this Tuesday when we're recording this for many of the cards in the set. It's a kind of conditional yes if the right pieces fall into place. And that's not going to happen for all of them. And so, yeah, there are some cards which will be hyped during preview season that never really find their home, but that's to be expected, right? And it's worth scouring the spoiler for the ones that do have that hidden potential so that maybe it's not now. Maybe we don't get the enabler that, is the final piece of the puzzle. But let's say in 2 or 3 sets from now, if that card just sneaks into the Innistrad 2 spoiler innocuously, then you can be the first one to kind of hit the ground running and put all of that together.
Yeah. What about some more cards that need some synergy? How do we feel about Zabaz?
Okay, I will defer to you on this one. I will give you the privilege of reading the text there.
So this is Zabaz, or Zabiz, I don't know. The Glimmer Wasp. 1, legendary artifact creature insect. It has a color identity of Boros, so we're just going to spoil that part up front for you, Commander, Modern, Hybrid players. It is a modular 1 creature. If a modular triggered ability would put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, put that many +1/+1 +1/+1 counters, that's a terrible thing to say, on that creature instead. So it's legendary, but if you legend rule it, you get 2 counters off the modular on the second one. But this ability only triggers on the resolution of modular, so it doesn't like double its own modular.
Yeah, it's so I love the idea here, and I'm a sucker for any kind of fiddly artifact stuff. I love the Hardened Scales deck, which was due to somewhat with the loss of Mox Opal, but I actually don't really like this design at all, I think, because between the phrase modular triggered ability, which is already somewhat awkward, I think a lot of people are going to see the text modular 1, which, at least on the edition of the card that we're seeing here, doesn't have reminder text, and God knows how they could fit reminder text for modular on this card. I think there will be a lot of people who assume, oh, that itself is a modular triggered ability, and try to put an additional counter on there. And then in addition, the fact that when it dies, it's no longer around to see itself, and so you are only moving however many counters it had versus that many +1, and people will make that mistake too. There's a lot of room to misunderstand this card, and I think that is more acceptable in this set than it would be in basically any other one. But even so, it's like, it feels like there's a lot to maybe get tripped up on here, and that can kind of be a feel bad.
Yeah, but what if we finished off the text box of the card and continued reading? Okay.
Oh, how rude of me. Yes.
Yes, white. Zazbaz the Glimmer Wasp gains flying until end of turn. Whatever. Sure. Why? Oh, there's another ability. They actually found... They have an ability that takes up 4 lines, 2 other abilities, and still found room for red destroy target artifact you control. What?
Yeah, we couldn't have worked these 2 into, sacrifice an artifact to have Zabaz gain an ability for hybrid or whatever. No, we had to space it out this way. Yeah, this is... there is a lot to unpack here, I believe, is the delicate way of putting it.
No, I think about all it is to unpack is that you just get to play 8 Arcbound Workers, and some of them put counter, like, some of them just turn into more counters on the original Arcbound Worker.
Yeah, so I guess we have green-red Hardened Scales is the kind of combination now, which isn't really something I ever thought I'd say. Yeah, I think this is a good piece for that deck, which had kind of more 2-drops than it could shake a stick at, but really needed additional Arcbound Workers, of all things, to tie the room together, and Sparring Construct was not it, let me tell you. I put that card in my deck and regretted it every single time, and I would be somewhat confused. I would have questions with this card in my deck, just how the card works, but I wouldn't regret doing it, because I think this is that missing piece there.
Yeah, it also naturally works really well with the Ozolith, which is one of the more powerful cards that got added to that deck in the last year or so. I don't think Hardened Scales is as far out of the modern metagame reach as it looks with the absence of Mox Opal. It's really just fighting the uphill battle against all the artifact removal spells.
Yeah, it's weird to think that deck was never actually a good Mox Opal deck for the most part, and that's largely because you didn't have good ones to spend that mana on, and your mana curve was weirdly clumped at the 2 slot. I guess that now fixes that, so I don't know if it would be safe to give that deck back Mox Opal, although there are a lot of anti-artifact safety valves built into these Modern Horizon sets, so maybe it would be.
Is this the classic, you're allowed to play Mox Opal, but only if your deck contains Arcbound Ravager, Ink Moth Nexus, and 14 other creatures?
Yeah, if you're playing good, fair, honest Magic with it.
Okay, that's fair. I have loved my Mox Opal experiences, so I wouldn't mind that, but I think we're not quite to that point in Modern. We're just adding cards like Zabaz, we're adding additional Arcbound Workers to our decks instead.
And there are some other weird and wacky stuff that we can get to shortly. But let's take a brief break first to mull over exactly how this card, why this card, and just all of its various ins and outs.
What's up, everyone? Justin Parnell here.
Along with Ryan Overturf, and we want to tell you about the single best podcast on the SCG network.
Well, obviously, Ryan, you're talking about the 540.
Indeed I am, and that is the best podcast because we talk about the best format in the history of Magic.
Cube Draft?
Cube Draft.
Every week we go over all things Cube.
We're talking about in-depth reviews of brand new cards.
The best ways to draft and think about Arena and Magic Online Cube formats,
as well as ways to play with your friends,
and ways to play with your enemies.
Also some ways to make your friends into your enemies.
And cardboard takes of a variety of temperatures.
So if you're a fan of structured nonsense,
or if you hate it,
either way, all the same, check out the 540 every week wherever you find your podcasts, and right here on StarCityGames.com.
All right, and we are back to go through the rest of this big batch of Modern Horizons 2 preview cards, and I don't know if we want to get to the elephant in the room just yet, or I don't know what creature is meant to be, actually, or is there other stuff we want to cross off the list first?
Well, let's lead in with a nice free card. We've got Mog Salvage. This is an appropriate free card for the format. So, Modern is not a format that has historically been without free spells. We've always had the packs, we've always had Snapback, we've always had, well, no longer have Simian Spirit Guide. But it's really been a case of when the free spells are narrow and unique, that's when they're interesting. And when you're starting to accumulate free advantages just generically, like Rite of Flame was, like Chrome Mox would be, like Mox Opal kind of turned into at the end of the day, that's when they've started to get banned. Mog Salvage is really interesting and very specific. This is a reprint into Modern from Nemesis. It's part of a cycle. I really hope the rest of the cycle is not in here because Submerge is a giant jerk and so is Massacre. But Mog Salvage is 2 and a red. If an opponent controls an island and you control a mountain, you may cast the spell without paying its mana cost. Destroy target artifact. Instant. Really simple. It's just free shatter if they have an island and you have a mountain. That's not even remotely guaranteed in any way. I don't even know if this is better in those cases than just playing like Ancient Grudge, but it's kind of awesome that it exists.
Yeah, that's what worries me, is that I don't see a reason for this card to be in a set other than for the sake of completeness. And so that does make me think maybe the rest of that cycle is coming down the pipeline here.
I really hope not, because I'm already sick of putting things on top of people's libraries because of, we'll just dive right into it.
Okay. So there is turns out actually no subtlety about this card, but its name is Subtlety, and I will let you read off the text here and try to keep yourself under control as you do so.
Evoke, exile a blue card from your hand.
Yay! Woo!
No,
Sorry,
I don't
continue.
like it. Flying Flash, when it enters the battlefield, choose up to one target creature spell or planeswalker spell. Its owner puts it on the top or bottom of their library. Subtlety is also just 2 and a blue for a 3/3. Like, why? Why are we getting free Ether Gust? Why is it like, oh, you're trying to cast a creature, how about you don't do that? Like, why is that something we want in Modern? Why?
Well, you see, it used to be that if you cast a non-creature spell, it could get counted for free, but creatures slip through that net, and we just couldn't have that. So we needed to fill that gap in that net there. So now we have this card, I suppose, which Ryan Overturf made a very good point that this card could also be called Grief rather than Subtlety, which made me think, what if the whole cycle is just variants on Grief, where if there's one that's especially good, that could be Good Grief. If there's one that's bad, it could be probably the white one, honestly. It could be Grief, ? I think there's a lot of design space, I believe is the technical term there.
The only thing good I have to say about this card existing is that it's not good with Ephemerate, and it punishes you for taking London Mulligans. That's it. That's all I've got. It's actually fine with Ephemerate. It's just not like stupid broken. You're not like, you don't get 3 triggers of whatever. You're not like, like I said, it's interesting when the free effects are specific and narrow, not just broad and breaking down how people pay mana in the format. One of the appeals of Modern is that you're casting actual 5 mana spells as opposed to Legacy where you don't get to cast spells that cost mana. And like, I don't think what you're supposed to do if you're admitting defeat on Legacy continuing to exist is just turn Modern into Legacy. Then you just have like a bad Legacy because all your Legacy players already own their dual lands and will never give them up and will just sit in their corner and play and still won't attract new players. So you've got bad Legacy and no Modern. That's what these cards are doing. It's not anything good. Like, what's the Patrick Sullivan quote? What are the odds this goes poorly? Very high. How bad is it if it goes badly? Very bad, because people just stop playing cards that cost mana.
Right, and for the most part, and I could be wrong, I don't think people are that excited to cast Force of Will and Legacy. They feel obligated to do so and to put that card in their deck, because if they don't, then some jerk who shows up with Lion's Eye Diamond is going to send them to the Shadow Realm. So, it's something that you are forced to do thanks to the constraints of the format. And I go into this in my article on Grief this week, where introducing free spells into a format kind of increases the relative importance of each of those, where Lion's Eye Diamond means you need Force of Will, whereas Diamond Lion or just like generic turn 3, turn 4 combo does not, because you get to cast like actual counterspell now or whatever your other interactive pieces would be. And so I don't know if that's a play pattern we even want in the format or if it's desirable to exist. You really do need to show your work there. And I don't know if you could replicate that in Modern without also really going over the line in terms of the free spells that you do print. So they already did that in the form of Hogak. There is stuff that Modern has inherited, like potentially Summoner's Pact past a certain point. And I just don't know why this is a thing that we're pushing. Like, as you mentioned, Patrick Sullivan all the time makes a point of saying the 1-mana cards don't need any help, right? Like, a 1-mana card can only ever be so card. And there is a world of difference between 0 mana and 1 mana even, so much of the time. Like, I don't know if, when we're doing things like unbanning Jason Mind Sculptor to give people an additional incentive to get to that 4 mana point and cast big, flashy spells, if this is the reaction to those we want to be introducing here.
Going back to Legacy, that's always the feel bad part. When someone Force of Wills your creature, it's like, why? Like, I was trying to do something. This ignores Cavern of Souls. The only upside of this countering other creatures is when it counters your opponent's grief. Like, why is this? Why are you putting this in as a safety valve for the other interaction and just making life horrible for everyone else? Like, what are you doing?
The thing about subtlety too is it does hit other copies of itself. So if you're in a subtlety mirror, you can subtlety the opponent's subtlety, right, to force your spell through. And so you could get these immediate stack walls where I play a creature, you go down a card to cast subtlety, I go down a card to cast my own subtlety to force my thing through. And at that point, neither player has any cards left, and it's where does the game go from here, right?
This is a card that deserves to get Veil Summered and can't get Veil Summered.
Yeah, there are very few cards that honestly, truly deserve to get Veil Summered, and most of those live in Legacy, but this is one, and Veil Summer is the hero that we deserve now? Like, have we really got to that point?
And unlike, I'm going to keep going, because unlike Grief, this card is just like a totally fine 4-drop to cast once you're casting it. Like, it's just Mystic Snake. Like, why? Yeah. Like, Grief, at least, like, when you cast it on 4, it's like, well, they have less cards in hand. This has a window. It has to do the thing. This is just like, it's Force of Will that later is also a 2-for-1. Like, it completely negates the entire problem with Force of Will, which is that it's clunky or it's card disadvantage. It's like, no, this is like a little clunky card advantage or super efficient at a slight card disadvantage. Like, why? Anyways.
Yeah, it's not a permanent answer. And so, if you can't answer the Primeval Titan or something that you just put on the top of your opponent's deck, you will need to answer that in short order again. The hardcast mode of Subtlety, if that's how you cast it, does help with that, where you now have a form of pressure which can pivot into this tempo plan. But as you say, this is just a thing that you can hold up mana for in the mid game, and it's not quite Cryptic Command versus Mistbind Clique, but it's close enough, right? Where if the opponent tries to play around Subtlety or play around anything else, then you can just cast your Subtlety and start getting the beatdown.
Just play Mill, and you can Heatran Crab away the thing they put on top. Like, what? Like, that's it. That's all
Jesus.
I got. I'm out of things.
I had not even considered that angle, which, God. Yeah. Yeah, you hate to see it, frankly.
You literally hate it. Yeah.
Where do you think this goes then? Like, is it a just generic consideration for any blue deck, or does it belong in some places more so than others? Hedron Crab aside.
I think part of the problem is that the blue decks that don't want to play this card, a good portion of those are going to be pushed out of the metagame by it. I think that, yeah, I don't think this leads to good play patterns. That's all I've got. I think that it is more likely to show up in. I think this will lead to a slight condensing of colors in the Esper decks because you want more blue cards and also want more card advantage, which again pushes you towards blue cards. I don't expect it to show up in the Is It Prowess deck significantly, though maybe you just want it as a sideboard card along the lines of Force of Negation, where it's actually like a functional card in your deck as well. I don't think there's any other decks. Again, I do think Mill really does want this card, but putting this card into the format to help Mill is stupid.
Do you maybe want to layer this with stuff like Spellqueller, where you're kind of you're then covering all of your bases from multiple angles then, and you have other ways to turn just a 3/3 flash flyer into a significant threat?
Yeah, that makes sense. Sadly, not a spirit for the super double up, but yeah, any kind of tempo-y spirits deck would want this card.
I could even imagine just like a blue-white Stoneblade deck, right? Where at some point you flash in Subtlety, eat your opponent's card, and then you get to untap and put a Sword of Feast and Famine on this thing. Like that's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, Azoria Stoneblade, also a good home for Path to Exile and Field of Ruin, 2 cards that are going to break the symmetry on this.
Yeah. So it's just, why make it difficult to cast like a 5 mana or 6 mana creature? I say that fully acknowledging my own bias as someone who enjoys casting Primeval Titan, but I admit that one's a little over the line. But just, why is punishing casting the flashy 4 and 5 drops that you put in these sets so that people build decks around them? Like, why is that what we're going for? Why is that the goal here?
At least this card self-contains Jace, because one of the things it's best with is Jace.
Well, sure. Some consolation there, I suppose. We do, this is actually the most fun of any podcast recording session, is when you get new updates live on the air. And so, as I'm scrolling Twitter while recording, which I shouldn't be, but getting rewarded for that right now, I see Aaron Forsyth has posted Chatterstorm, which I'll let you guess the text on this one, because I feel like it's pretty hard to miss.
Chatterstorm. Well, it could either be a Shatterstorm riff that makes squirrels for each artifact destroyed, or it just literally has Storm and makes squirrels.
It literally has Storm and makes squirrels. So this is 1 and a green, create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token, Storm. So this is kind of the other end of the ooze that we spoke about, where that one is you're paying more to get a much bigger reward. This is the cheapest version of that Empty the Warrens kind of riff that we've ever seen.
Ooh, it's a common. It should be pre-banned in Pauper. Anyways, that aside.
Oh, jeez.
I think this card is a little better than it looks. It's similar to like the Tendrils Grape Shot versus Empty thing, where you can kind of short Empty someone, but you can't short Tendril someone. Well, you can never short Grape Shot someone, but you can definitely short Shatterstorm someone.
Yeah, I don't know if there's some kind of, like, the same way that in that Fecundity Goblins deck, the Empty the Warrens was the card that acted as, Dark Ritual and Ancestral Recall at the same time. I don't know if there's a way to immediately convert just having 6 bodies around into something else in that same way.
Yeah, we don't have Phyrexian Altar, though that may show up.
It would not surprise me, honestly. And maybe there's some other, like, maybe Goblin Bombardment or something ends up in the set. That would not shock me. Again, the green evoke creature in that cycle, like, that is a nice starting point for a turn involving these green storm cards.
Yeah, between that Summoner's Pact, you really just have the full-on broken set of free cards.
Yeah, so I'm sure there's an application which we could have come up with if we'd had more than 30 seconds to think about that one. I guess I will, as I say this, refresh Aaron's Twitter feed to see if... okay, let me... So... All right, we have maybe a limited signpost Squirrel uncommon there. And then, okay, we have like a uncommon Squirrel devotion thing, which I don't expect to show up much. But in terms of the batch of spoilers today, maybe that's more than enough already. I think we got our fair share there.
Yeah. I say we kick it to a quick break. We'll probably come back Thursday, fill in with some of the highlights of the next couple days. And from there, we'll round into the nonsense of the week after that section. You've been listening to me and Dom talk about Modern Horizons 2 previews, and if you want to get your sets of those lined up, StarCityGames.com has you covered. Check out StarCityGames.com/previews to pre-order Modern Horizons 2 singles and sealed product. Whether it's the normal version of cards, a draft set, or something fancier and the packs those versions come in, we've got it posted. This list keeps updating as more previews come on in, so keep an eye on StarCityGames.com/previews so you can snag the latest previews dropping from Modern Horizons 2.
And we are back to cover what I'm going to say is an entirely new batch of previews that we've just had dropped upon us here. We've already spent over an hour in here talking about the first batch from earlier in the week, and that honestly feels like years ago at this point. This feels like we're talking about the latest Modern Horizons 5 spoilers that have just been given to us.
I don't even know how to keep up with all these cards, and I think it's partially the fact that there's so many like reprints and inset cards that just like this set has as many cards as 5th edition or something, and I'm just like, I've never seen these.
Yeah. This is a lot. So in the interest of not having this be a 6-hour podcast, and in the interest for our editors who have to turn this around for tomorrow, as at the time of this recording, they really do not want it to be a 6-hour podcast either. So for this batch, we're going to take a more rapid fire approach for this. So we've each taken the cards that jumped out most to us or have the most talking points to them from this batch of previews, and we're just going to go back and forth on those until we get to the end of those lists and hopefully keep it more short and sweet than we did for the first batch.
Yeah, absolutely. You want me to start? You want you to start? Either way is good for me.
The floor is yours.
Okay, I'm going to kick off with the one that basically dropped right before this, which is Solitary Confinement. First of all, the Judgment watermark looks great. But while this card is really miserable to lose to, I think it loses a lot in the modern era of design where like Mortify was basically not a card when this was played, and now we have like Abrupt Decay and everything for free. So your opponent's going to have something in their deck that deals with it. I just kind of dig that it exists, and I'm interested to see what happens with it in the modern era of Magic.
My plan was to save this to the end for the end of my list, and then bank my time, rocket through the rest of it so that I could store up enough to justify an extended rant on this card at the end, because I don't get this. This is so baffling to me. I'm sure we'll have choice words for the rest of the grief cycle that we've had spoiled so far, and maybe some of the other cards in the set. But I kind of at least get wanting to push those or wanting to push cards in the set in general. We already had this experience 20 years ago, and it wasn't fun back then. Not quite sure how it made it through quality control the first time. And now we're just trying to do this all over again, where either it works and your opponent just doesn't participate in the game anymore, the game ends on the spot, or it doesn't work and the card does literally nothing. It's really as polarized as a card could possibly be. And if you go and listen to the Receivables episode on Mirrodin and you hear Patrick talking about Platinum Angel, the experience for a new player of opening a booster pack and seeing that card where they're just blown away by not just the art and the whole just aesthetic of it, but that text box. You can't lose the game. Your opponents can't win the game. That basically is what this card is, but in a much less resonant way and in a much more annoying way. Where at least with Platinum Angel, there's a hefty investment involved up front. You've got to get to 7 mana, and sometimes you're just staying in the game by any means possible, and then you rip that 7th land, you slam down your angel, and you cross your fingers, and it's this high tension moment in the game. You want to see if they have that removal spell or not, and it's a creature, so most of the time, there are at least options for how they might interact with this. Solitary Confinement, there's none of that tension and all of the frustration. It's there are 2/5 of the color pie where for 25 years they just didn't get to interact with this card type because that was a decision that was made back in the day, and that was just carried forward over the years. And we've spoken on this very podcast about the dangers of putting just stuff which you want to be able to interact with on enchantments, but that's not something that you can take for granted for many colors or color combinations. And so I don't know what the game looks like where this makes the game more interesting. It's either you win the game on the spot, you lose the game on the spot, or you wait to see if your opponent has, a greater total N of disenchants and you have solitary confinements plus Sterling Groves. And because of the mechanics of confinement, the way the card works, it's not like the game continues until you get to discover that. You get no more resources. You're just sitting there discarding your squee and then picking it up, for example, and hoping that when you get to solve that equation, the outcome breaks in your favor. I don't get why this is happening again.
I'm a sucker for old nonsense like this, and I think Sterling Grove is the problem, and that's all I got.
Okay. I mean, hey, if we want to go in this vein, then give us Stasis, give us Winter Orb, give us some real hits from back in the day. I just don't see the point of this one in particular.
Give me Stasis. Okay. Well, I fired, you fired back. I'll go to the next one. I got Esper Sentinel. This is white for a 1/1 artifact creature. Whenever your opponent plays the first non-creature spell of each turn, unless they pay X, you draw a card, where X is this creature's power, and this card is a giant trap. It is not good. It looks like a Thalia, but your opponent just has the option of not paying. Options are bad. Like, they can just be like, okay, Supreme Verdict, kill 5 things, draw a card. Shatterstorm, don't care. Like, Through the Breach, draw a card, 15 new sack 6 permanents. Who cares? Like, it's only going to beat up on, like, people still playing Jund, and even then, they can just be like, oh, I'm going to have to pay 1 more. Okay, Fatal Push that, pay an extra 1, bolt that, move along the line. Kolaghan's Command, whatever. Like, this card is not good. It's very bad. And it just looks like a good card.
It's not Thalia, it's Mystic Remora. That card is good in specific formats at specific times. I don't think this is one of those times.
It's not Remora. Remora is each spell. This is just the first one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a much worse Remora, but that's like a more accurate-ish comparison, I suppose. Yeah. But moving swiftly on from that one then, don't need to dwell on that. Let's talk about Persist. This is 1 and a black. You return target non-legendary creature from your graveyard to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it. So again, the same kind of safeguards that we spoke about with the priest, the white-black 2-drop. Not getting Grizzlebrand with this, not getting some of the real big hits, but if you search enough in the modern card pool, I'm sure you can find good eligible targets to return with this. Don't know if that really fuels a reanimated deck by itself. You might need, one more piece on top of that to tie that together, but you can imagine, like, turn 2, turn 3, Sundering Titan, let's say, is the one that jumps to mind for me. Just devastating some opponents. That's going to end the game on the spot. People come prepared with Graveyard Hate. There's a lot of stuff to hate out, and now even more so, even outside of this, with this set. But I think this one is priced to move, and I do expect to see that showing up.
Yeah, love this card. Also on my list. Love how it looks like an alpha card, but with, like, the M10 lessons of, like, don't target your opponent's graveyard, don't have odd counters, but also has, like, it says persist and is persist. It's just great. The card that I want to return is Tidespout Tyrant. That card is busted with this. You're just going to bounce all your opponent's permanents. The problem, what you actually need is a way to get the Tidespout Tyrant into your graveyard on turn 1. Because turn 2 casting Unmarked Grave, I believe is the name of the card, finding this, and then turn 3 recurring this is like, you're not really doing anything better than the rest of the format has. It's worth noting you can kind of probably hybrid this with, like, some Gifts Right stuff and have a more controlling shell where, like, you don't commit a bunch to reanimate. But anyways, love this card. Really excited to see if it sees play. It'll feel like some 2002 standard.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to one of the absolute just flawless guaranteed hits from the set, Ignoble Hierarch. So this is Noble Hierarch with a little prefix on it, and we're color shifting it into Jund. That's it. That's the tweet.
Yeah, love to see it. I have this on my list as well. It is a reason to put Unclaimed Territory into more decks. It is not, like, significantly better than playing Birds of Paradise in a lot of decks. I don't think it's, like, breaking new ground. It just looks really awesome. I don't even think it's breaking new ground in Goblins. I just want to point out that Shamans is kind of, like, a pretty dope creature type in this format too, and I want to dig up some of the things I tried to pull without in a few years ago.
Yeah, it's like a tier 3 creature type until there's enough for it to become a tier 2 creature type. It just kind of sneaks up on you with some new printings there. With this card, I've seen some criticism that, well, why wouldn't this have the actual Jund mechanic in Devourer or some other non-exalted mechanic? The reason is they want it to be playable. They want it to be as resonant, as good as Noble Hierarch was, and so they're using the exact same template as Noble Hierarch. And I maybe it's just the fact that the shards block lore never really connected with me, but I don't view Exalted as something which, if it's not in Bant, then something has gone terribly wrong somewhere. And we already had that color break of sorts in M13 with like Knight of Infamy and some other cards there. So I don't see this as beyond the pale in any means. And if there's a set where you're going to question those assumptions, this is that set. So yeah, absolutely love this one. Guaranteed home run. Expect to see it a lot. Expect to see it doing well.
If this was the best card in the set for Modern, the most impactful, they would have done a great job.
Yeah, I agree. Good luck with that, but also, yeah, we can live in hope.
Quickly, Rant, I made this tweet today, but, the joke is really lowbrow, but it's the kind of thing people want. So think of this as like a Too Fast, Too Furious and not like a Jumping the Shark.
Yeah, not everything that is derivative has to be hokey, and some stuff is going to miss there, some stuff's going to hit. This is a hit, and you don't need to group it in with the stuff that feels a little bit contrived.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'll jump into my next card on the list, which is Ragavan. This is a red for a nice little legendary monkey pirate. Oh, dang. Actually, as a type. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card, not play, cast. And then it has dash 1 in a red. This is the token off of Karizev, but it's just the monkey. This card is worse than it looks in Modern. The ability to cast cards from your opponent's deck has historically been really not great in Modern. This is one of the things we learned playing with Fallen Shinobi after Modern Horizons 1. You would just flip the top 2 cards of the deck and be able to cast them. It's like, what am I going to do with an Ancient Stirrings? Why? Or
right.
You play against Esper Control, you're like, I have a Fatal Push. What am I doing? The cards from your opponent's decks in Modern are like really like insular, parasitic, linearized. Like your cards and their cards don't line up, and this in like red mirrors isn't great. But making treasures is really good, so that's kind of where you want it. But the other point is like, how many times have you like cast Goblin Guide, untap with Goblin Guide, attack with Goblin Guide again, and then hit them, and then the game continued in a way that you lost? Like, I don't know if this is an upgrade on existing red 1-drops, but it is really cool.
Yeah, this one, unsurprisingly, on my list as well. And I have to think Patrick Sullivan had his hand in working this one into the mix when he was consulting on the set. I agree. I think that part of the charm of Modern is that the decks do feel very individualized and very unique. And sometimes you look at someone's Modern deck and you look at someone else's Modern deck, and they could be playing different formats, different games entirely sometimes. And so, yeah, if this card was in Standard, it would be an absolute banger. I expect this card to see some play in Legacy, where curves basically have to be low because of the constraints that the free spells, not to go back to that well again, the constraints that they place on the format. And if every deck has most of the same cards, like every blue deck is going to have Brainstorm and Ponder and so on, then you can guarantee basically that most of the time you are going to flip something castable and that card is going to be good for you. Whereas in Modern, yeah, if you flip Primeval Titan ad nauseum, like what are these cards actually doing for you? So much of the card's power is tied up in other places, and just not having haste might actually be the deal breaker. I don't think this card should have haste, but when you line this up against Goblin Guide, Monastery Swift Spear, even some of the other 1-drop options in this set for red aggro decks in the format, I don't know if this is actually the best one in its own file, let alone compared to other options.
Yeah, I do want to make one quick point to revert to a previous card that's sort of related to red 1-drops. The only red exalted creature is a 1-drop goblin, so I kind of love that with the exalted, ignoble hierarch. Anyways, continuing along, what was your next card?
Okay, so in my unsorted list here, the next one I have up is General Ferrus Rokirich, we're going to go with. So going to confirm that I actually have the right text here. This is 3 mana, 1 and Boros for a 3/1 legendary human soldier. It has hexproof from monocolored spells, and whenever you cast a multicolored spell, you create a red and white 4/4 golem. So this doesn't take too much work to just flood the battlefield with a lot of power very quickly. Manamorphose, as it usually is in these things, is the prime candidate that most people are highlighting there. I don't think that this fits into any existing kind of multicolored aggro deck, and if you're in the market for some gold heavy Domain Zoo style stuff, we'll get there, don't worry. But I imagine this could slot into, if there is like a build of Jeskai Control in the kind of Guides of Saint Draft role that we had before, this might be a good upgrade there. Or if you need some kind of pivot for your 5-color Niv Mizzet deck or your Bring to Light deck, then this could be a candidate there too.
Are any of the free spells multicolored?
Not yet, but I guess we'll save that one for the next Modern Horizons. But in theory, you can play this card in humans because yes, it is a human. Yes, you can make the mana work with Cavern of Souls or so on, and that also lets you cast a bunch of meddling mages or Silver Core Silencers, Mantis Riders, and so on. I don't know if, especially with something like Imperial Recruiter joining the mix, there are so many good 3-drops you can play in humans. I don't think that upgrading the worst one to this, if that's even what this would be doing, is what moves the needle for that deck coming back.
Yeah. I'm ready. I didn't have this on the list. I'm ready to move on to a different multicolored legend.
Okay.
This is Asmore, and I'm not saying the rest because we don't have enough time for it. I like this card as just like putting a random piece of cardboard into your hand to help with future discard synergies. I don't really care about casting the Cookbook. It's just kind of like occasionally you'll just get to cast a 4-mana Raise Dead after casting this, and usually you'll just discard the Cookbook to like a Goblin Lore or something. I don't know if like a cantrip Wild Nacatl is quite modern good enough, but it might be like a... The problem is that like paying 1 mana for this and like then paying another mana for a hollow one, like you actually need to get to the point that you're discarding 3 cards a turn to really go off with this existing. And there's kind of this weird balance of like how many Cookbooks do you want to play because it only searches library. Might be like 3 of this and 2 Cookbooks, but then Cookbook's just like a really bad card. I mean, the best thing I can say about this is that you can free roll cycle a Street Wraith and just cast it on the spot. But I want the end effect of what it gives you is pretty good. I just don't know what the deck building cost actually is. I think that's the balance to find.
See, I had this on my list. I also had the Cookbook, and my internal debate was, do I get to group these together? Because I actually maybe have some interest in the Cookbook just independently of this, because having a way to, having a 1-mana discard outlet that is color agnostic, there are roles that could show up in, but specifically a way that converts one resource to another on the cheap. So you pay 1 mana for the card, and then the conversion itself is free. Maybe there's something you can do with that, and I don't know what that is exactly. But I know you were you were bullish or bearish, whichever one is positive there, on Bartered Cow back in the day, and there's some like Bartered Cow combo deck that we can put together here.
I'm all ears, and I believe the term appropriately is bullish.
Okay. Well, yeah, very fitting then. So I guess back on me, I'll move this along to Bone Shards. So this is a mashup of, I guess, Bone Splinters and Lightning Axe. This is black. As an additional cost to cast this, you can either sacrifice a creature or discard a card. And this is destroy target creature or planeswalker. So a tremendously versatile version of that effect, the most pushed one that we've seen, very fittingly for this set. And what stands out to me here is the decks that want one of these effects in Modern are somewhat likely to also have a way to make use of the other one. So if you have a deck with Bloodghast, let's say, you have some kind of sacrifice deck going on, then yeah, you're going to want to discard the Bloodghast to bring it back for free, or sacrifice it once you've brought it back for free, maybe with the first copy of Bone Shards that you cast in the turn. So if you can use every part of the buffalo on this card, this is a tremendously versatile but also efficient removal spell. And the competition there is getting even better by the set, and this one is no exception. But even with that in mind, I think this one is still quite appealing.
Yeah, also on my list, had the exact same things to say about it. The only thing holding this card back is whether costing black is less of a thing that you want as opposed to costing red. Whether you want Cathartic Reunion in your deck or whether you want to be, jamming with some Stitcher Supplier. That's really the only dividing thing here. This card's pretty solid. Mm-hmm. Love it.
Yeah. Back to you.
Okay. My next on the list, as we've been skipping around, is I'm going to steal a 2-for-1 here. I've got Territorial Kavu, loosely Scion of Draco. My basic point here is that if you are paying life to your lands to Domain Zoo, you should just be playing Death Shadow. That was kind of how Death Shadow even broke into the Modern format to start, was that like people tried to build a pseudo Domain Zoo deck and then accidentally put Shadow into it. And it's just better than these cards. But if you're like turn 1 fetching Ketria Triome and then trying to cast a Niv Mizzet, I am all ears for playing a turn 2 Brawler and just getting the game done and having that axis of your deck functioning. Because the biggest issue with the Niv decks now is they just don't do anything. They're just like a bunch of Abrupt Decays and a Niv Mizzet. So if your opponent beats a bunch of Abrupt Decays, then stops your Niv Mizzet or just kills you regardless of it, your deck's trash. But if you have a 2-mana 5/5 that like has a bunch of extra text and is in one of your like, I mean, it overlaps with Wrenn and 6, but it's one of your otherwise less saturated color pairs, I'm in.
I am much less confident in saying this is worse than Shadow than I would have been 2 hours ago before I knew that Solitude existed. But I don't know how much that card is going to change things at all. I think I'm more optimistic on each of these cards individually and together than it sounds like you are. I think when you can build with that curve in mind, whether you're casting these on turn 2 or you expect that by turn 3 in your Tribal Flame Zoo deck or Domain Zoo deck, you're going to have all of these land types, and this is like a really juiced up Serra Avenger almost. I don't know. I think it's good enough on rate there, but I might have interest in something which has tied in to Scion of Draco's forebearers in the past. Let's talk about Calibrated Blast. So this is 2 and a red. You reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land card. You put the revealed cards on the bottom in a random order, and the first non-land card that you reveal, this card deals damage equal to that card's mana value to any target. So the boomers among you will recognize this as Erratic Explosion, but with the glow up that you would expect after 20 years. It's aged like a fine wine.
Okay, I did not have that one on my list. I do like that the flashback lets you complete the 20.
It does, yeah. So you can, if your card costs, I guess, 10 or more, or in a format rife with fetch land, shock lands, and so on, not too difficult to get up to 10 or 9, whatever it is, and then get to that again on your upkeep. I highlight this because in a format that has Jason Mind Sculptor and now Brainstone, it is actually, that curve of turn 1 Brainstone, end of turn 2, activate Brainstone, turn 3 Blast, revealing, let's say, Emrakul, the Aeon's Tone, which maybe you're also pairing with Through the Breach in this deck as some like hybrid combo plan. It's not that difficult to just one-hit KO with this card, I think, much less so than it used to be.
Yeah. I think that was like the old issue is that you would cast it for 16, you'd come up a little short, and this card's really good at closing that last gap because it flashes back and does it for you. Like before, you'd have to fire off 2 Fire Ices, and it was a pain.
That too, and also now you have stuff like Prismari Command, you have Lightning Bolt, Snapcaster Mage. It is not that difficult to cross a finish line, even if you do end up a little bit short when you cast this card.
Yeah. Real quick on Territorial Kavu, before I forget and before we move on, the fact that this is red-green, if you're building Domain Zoo, that drives you away from playing Stomping Grounds so that you can fetch green X and red X and then cast this on turn 2. Anyways, continue.
And if you're going for Yahtzee, what you want is, ideally, if you can take the first turn off, get a Triome and then get the 2 colors missing from that Triome, or, and this was the issue with all of the Domain Zoo decks in the past, you want to make sure that your gold 2-drops are not boxed out by certain combinations of lands. So, back in the day when you had Boros Swiftblade, this white-red 2-drop, you really did not want to have to get stuff like Breeding Pool if you didn't have to. So be very conscious of that in deck construction when you're sketching these lists out initially. Yeah, it's just you wanna make it so that when you fetch 2 lands that make 4 colors, they are not the lands that line up with your gold cards. Moving on to a card that is not gold or any colors, I've got Academy Manufacturer. This is a 3-mana 1/3 with whenever you would make a treasure, food, or clue token, make them all instead. And the reason that I brought this up is that's just like a shit ton of resources. You just like not even sacrificing it. It's just 3 Darksteel Ingots. Do you know what you could do with 3 Darksteel Ingots? You could tap them all to Urza. That's just so many things. And I have a feeling that this card is going to create some like really spirally situations. I don't quite know what the best way to make food, treasure, or clues is, but there are a lot of options. Yeah, I expect this will end up as my pet card from the set. Certainly excited to build some kind of casual decks or have like a cube archetype build around stuff like this. But in terms of modern, I did see a shell and I can't remember who it was, so apologize for that. Can't credit you just at this time. But someone was building this into like a collected company deck with stuff like Gilded Goose. You would have Gingerbread Cabin to search for and a mana base that was very heavy on fetch lands and forests, so that if you were able to play this with a fetch land, you would instantly get all 3 tokens and then could parlay that into something else. I do agree that this with Urza is what immediately sets the cogs whirring. That being said, anything really into Urza is, the Urza half is doing a lot of the work there. But if the other engine pieces are there and you can find those, then this is incredibly efficient and this gets out of control very quickly.
Yeah. Okay, what do you got up next?
All right, talk to me, or I guess I'll talk to you about Imperial Recruiter. So this is 2 and a red, just search your library for a creature with power 2 or less and put it into your hand on a 1/1 human. And so this card is, we've had Recruiter of the Guard and this in Legacy for a while, and then Militia Bugler kind of doing an impression of this card in humans at various points, but we have never had this direct tutoring effect in the format before in quite the same way. And this opens up a lot of possibilities for what you can do. So, we mentioned Urza. That's something you can find with this. We've mentioned Yawgmoth a lot on this very episode. That's a card that you can find with this. And it does also slot just very naturally into that 5-color human shell where you don't have to play Bugler and just hope to find that whatever it is, that meddling mage, that Thales lieutenant in your top 4 cards, you can just fetch one up directly. And this card is incredible with Ether Vial. I don't know if having this card in the mix means you want to think about stuff like Charming Prince as a 2-drop, where you can set up these chains together that let you just grind out any opponent or recover from a sweeper very easily. But specifically, in a format where you have all of these crazy linear decks doing their thing, being able to get the exact hate piece that locks them out, whether it's, let's say, Sanctum Prelate, which is joining the party now, or Magus of the Moon, or Meddling Mage, Remorseful Cleric for graveyard decks, and so on. Like, that is an incredibly powerful option now. And you asked me a few weeks ago what would need to happen for humans to come back to Modern, and I'm starting to put the pieces together there, I think.
Okay. I did not have this card, largely because I didn't know quite what it would be doing new in this format. I did think about it going to get Felidar Guardian and then flickering it and then getting Kikijiki. Which is pretty nice. And yeah, it also doesn't get Kessig Malcontents, which makes me sad, but can't get them all.
Mm-hmm. What else did you have?
Okay, my next card up is Launis, the Simic Legend. Let me pull up the exact subtitle on this card. Launis Cryptozoologist. It is a 1/2 for green-blue, legendary creature, Snake Elf Scout. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, investigate. And then it's got this extra bonus ability of tap, sack X clues. Your opponent reveals X cards from their deck. You can put a non-land permanent with mana cost X or less from them onto the battlefield, and then the rest of them go on the bottom of their deck. This just looks like a 2 mana whenever you play a creature, draw a card. There's extra hoops, but you draw a card. Or a clue just as another piece of material. So I think that it is... For 2 mana, it's really you usually can get these engines like Tracker at 3 mana. 2 mana is a whole new ballgame. It's slow, but I think that the trick here is again going to be converting your investigate clues into something more immediate than sacrificing them. And my thought is that this is powering out double your artifacts whenever you play a Frogmite or a Signal Pest in Affinity. And with the artifact land, you can rack up that count really high and then do something like Gear per Ether Grid. Yeah,
this card, I know that it can do something, but I don't quite know what. And it maybe falls in the same bucket as other Simic 2-drops, in fact. Kinnan was one that really scared people when it came out, but didn't make a big splash. Or Quandix Apprentice from Strixhaven, actually, which, if you're casting several spells in a turn, can really get out of control. There are a lot of these cheap engine creatures which are just begging for, maybe one more printing. Maybe there's one missing piece of the puzzle, which when they pick that up, they just go completely berserk. And this definitely is one of those.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. What's the next one?
All right, so I will talk about Dragon's Rage Channeler. So this is the other 1-drop competing for Ragavan's throne, trying to steal its treasure in the set. This is 1/1 for Human Shaman, cost red. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, surveil 1. So look at the top card and then you can put that card into your graveyard. And it has Delirium. As long as you have 4 or more card types in your graveyard, this card gets +2/+2, has flying, and attacks each combat if able. So if you can reliably get Delirium on the 2nd or 3rd turn, which we have seen these Dash Shadow decks and other aggro decks that had incentive to do that, you can do that in Modern with pretty alarming consistency. This is one of the best 1-drops on rate of all time. And then also, once you've completed that subquest, so to speak, it is still paying you off for casting further spells. If you are going this into Mishra's Bauble, Surveil 1, and then maybe next turn you Lightning Bolt 1 thing, Surveil 1, and then you get to, if the card on top is good, you cycle your Street Wraith and you get that. The amount of card selection it provides on the card that also is threatening to kill them if it's uncontested is pretty staggering.
Yeah, I'm in for this. And again, my only caveat is that putting too many threats into your prowess style decks that rely on the graveyard just leaves you exploitable to something like Soul Guide Lantern or Relic that's otherwise a free roll. I'm going to let you get one more because my next two I want to talk about separately, but they need to go back to back. So fire off your next one.
Okay. I'll mention Yavimaya, and I don't think we actually have the full English name of this card yet, but this is Green Urborg, basically. That tells you all you need to know. It's Urborg, but it makes everything into forest. And I mentioned this as a package deal of sorts with Korean Ranger that we're also getting as a new to modern reprint for the first time with the set. And in Legacy, that interaction is raising eyebrows because, in Elves, you can pick up your Gaia's Cradle, return it. And there are some colorless lands like Dark Depth that don't tap for mana, which now this acts as a kind of pseudo ritual with. In Modern, I don't know exactly what this does that's in the same vein as that, but it's just one of those cards which immediately makes you start thinking. And I know one interaction that you highlighted to me was we already have this deck in Yawgmoth where just trying to cast double green into triple black, and this helps to kind of square that circle, so to speak. And if you the only concern there, as I mentioned, was if you have this and Urborg in play at the same time on Magic Online, I do not want to think about the interface complications of that.
Yeah, though I do want to bring up, we did say recently that what was the best thing that could get added to the Yawgmoth deck? Ignoble Hierarch, a really good mana dork. That's just what you needed. So that deck looks like it's actually getting some upgrades despite being a deck we didn't think would. So the two cards I want to talk about back to back are Gaia's Will and Glimpse of Tomorrow. These are from the new no mana cost cycle. They're the green one and the red one. So Gaia's Will is just Yawgmoth's Will. So it suspends for a green, suspend 4, and then the actual spell text is you may cast spells and play lands from your graveyard this turn, and then if a card would go to your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. I think this card is just a giant trap and utterly heinous. Unsuspending a Yawgmoth's Will in your upkeep is not good. You want to cast Yawgmoth's Will usually when you have done other things that turn and then resolve it. And then going through the hoops of I'm going to Asfortold this and then cast all these things. The cards you want to play with Asfortold aren't cards you can cast from your graveyard with this. It's not like you're tutoring with rituals and stuff with your Asfortold. You're jumping through an extra hoop to build a Yawgmoth's Will, when I think most of the time in this format you could just cast Past in Flames.
Or Underworld Breach, or the list continues. And I think this is a good place to put the eyeballs, so to speak, where you see this card and you think, oh wow, they actually did that. And then when you reflect on it further, you realize, okay, there are a lot of hoops that you have to jump through to even start doing anything with this. But just that immediate reaction of, oh wow, I think is pretty important to have somewhere in the set.
Got some good flavor as well. If you read the book, The Thran, I'm going to just dive into these old Magic books every so often with this set. But the ending of The Thran is that Yawgmoth and the original Phyrexians are exiled by Rebek, who is an artificer or something in The Thran. I forget what her exact role is. And later she becomes the figurehead of as Gaia. And she is her image as Gaia is the crown of the Weatherlight. And that is what actually kills Yawgmoth in Apocalypse. Anyways, continuing on. Glimpse of Tomorrow, though, this is Warp World. So this is, or one-sided Warp World. So it's red to suspend 3. And when it resolves, you Warp World yourself. I'm going to read the exact text for those of you who have not played with Warp World. Shuffle all permanents you own into your library, then reveal that many cards on the top of your library. Put all non-aura permanents revealed this way onto the battlefield. Then do the same for auras, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So basically, the idea is you build a deck that is a bunch of permanents that create multiple permanents. And then Warp World. Or this card, and you would chain off Warp Worlds and then rebuy Warp Worlds and do all this crazy stuff. I think that it's almost easier to kick this off than the 8 mana card, and fairly easy to reuse this with Goblin Dark Dwellers. So I think that this card actually could, like, you end up building a combo deck that has like 4 of this, maybe a couple other deck cards, but then is also just like a functional deck along the line.
Okay, I'm kind of into that. I don't know what this deck looks like at all. I'll leave that to you and some of the other mad scientists out there to put that one together. But you have my attention at the very least.
Yeah, and then turn 2 suspending this is like a pretty good time frame to just naturally cast it as like a pretty big threat on your 5th upkeep, right? You just turn 2 suspend it and then spend 3 and 4 building up a board. And then they know if they let it resolve, you're just going to like, you know, get 1.5 to double your permanents, maybe double it again. It's going to be crazy. So yeah, I'm down for this card.
So I think there's a lot of overlap between our two lists here because I'm basically at the end of mine. I have one card left which we cannot avoid talking about, and we may need to combine our time here to rant about this one. Solitude. So this is the white member of the Grief Cycle, and this is 3 white for the sticker price, which you are going to end up paying a decent amount of the time, I think. This is a 3/2 flash lifelinker, and its entry text, the thing that you can get for free by evoking it, is Source of Plowshares. So I'll you probably have a better articulated anger with this one than I do by now, so the floor is yours. Go nuts.
I didn't even have this card on my list because I didn't want to even talk about it. I like, you know, this did not want to turn into like a 3 beers kind of rant podcast. But yeah, basically, like, they've spent the last 2 years systematically banning the cards in Modern that violate the turn 1 mana rule. And by last, like, 2 years, I mean, they banned all the ones that were previously conditional and then, like, became more and more unconditional because they banned all the ones that were unconditional 10 years ago. And they're like, none of this. But you can have generic, bland, free spells on turn 1 for, like, no reason and just break, like, you can break the mana rule as long as it's for, like, these cards. Like, this, what are you doing? Like, it's so incongruous with everything that like, and this may just be a thing where they like tested the set under like constraints of like, well, we're gonna have to play with companions or something. I don't know. I mean, they did write. Brad did write a good article about how Sam Black was like, you know, he consulted, and the first thing he did looking through was like, wait, Yorion exists? Okay, this is stupid. And like, I just think that these cards really miss the mark on what Modern is trying to be at this point in time, and what you need to do to make Modern a format where these cards should exist is unban a lot of cards that you had banned. And really, like, it's the kind of thing where you have already sunk a lot of equity into telling people that they cannot play with these cards that were parts of like Simian Spirit Guide. Like, a lot of people wanted to play Simian Spirit Guide decks, and you've already gone through the process of telling them they can't, and undoing that is really bad at this point. And this is just barking up the wrong tree, which is really sad because most of the rest of the set is like really well curated for the Modern experience of 2021. And these 5 cards, or at least the 3 of them we've seen, are just not even remotely in the ballpark.
This was my concern with Modern Horizons just as a concept when I discovered we were doing this for a second time, which is if you look back to the first Modern Horizons set, as we went over a few episodes ago, the vast majority of that set either did not make a big splash in Modern, or it did, but in a way that I think added mostly to the health of the format overall. But inevitably, the set will be remembered for some of the cards which were so egregious that they were far enough over the line that they had to be banned, like Hogak, Arcum's Astrolabe, or the stuff like Plague Engineer, which is never going to cross that threshold of needing to be banned, but just is kind of miserable to play against and doesn't need to be that good and just makes games of Magic worse to experience. And I think that is, to some extent, unavoidable when you have a set that is meant to push the envelope and to go this far. And so, yeah, by and large, I am thrilled with this set. If you remove this cycle from the equation, there are 1 or 2 cards that I have questions about, and you know, some of the reprints that I am scratching my head over, like Solitary Confinement. By and large, though, I think the set is a home run. But this is the concern for me, is that after only a few games of you're sinking all of these resources into casting some spells, or trying to map your game plan around, oh, how do I bob and weave around this removal spell or this piece of interaction? And okay, I'm just going to cast Solitude for free. I'll cast Subtlety for free. That is there much replayability to that experience? I don't really think so. And that you know, we've said our piece about grief, but Solitude and Subtlety, in a way, you know, whatever the blue one was, if it was going to be in that Aethergast counterspell kind of force negation kind of range, of course it was going to follow that template. But for me, like, does this card really need to have flash? Like, so you're tapped out, you've done your thing, you pass the turn, your opponent now has to respect the threat of Solitude at all times. And so if that traditional trade-off of, do I tap out for my big thing, or do I tap low for maybe my second best thing, but hold up a removal spell to hedge against a range of plays that they may or may not have on their turn, that's gone now, right? You play your big thing, and if they put any kind of meaningful investment into doing their thing on their turn while the shields are temporarily down, you just get to trump them and make them look like a fool. And I don't see what this is meant to add to the format. And so when Aaron Forsyth on the weekly MTG stream earlier, understandably, was asked about these cards, and he highlighted the need to have good reactive options in the modern format, which I totally agree with that top line statement. The issue here, though, is there comes a point where free spells get better at cementing an existing advantage than they do at being good counterplay, right? Where, in theory, yeah, Solitude, if you're on the draw, you're falling behind, whatever it is, this is a good answer to the opponent who's far out ahead. But by the same token, this also allows the opponent who is ahead on the battlefield to, you play your one creature, your Tarmogoyf, that's meant to stabilize, and you cross your fingers and you hope that that's going to get you back in the game, and they just effortlessly swat it away for free and just continue doing their thing, and now there's no hope of you coming back. I think that's going to be the more common play pattern by and large.
Even, like, these aren't answers, though. They're just Shriek Maws with the buyout of being a good answer. Like, this is just not, like, how you... I'm done with it. Whatever. Anyways,
yeah,
let's talk honestly, about fun cards.
Okay, the last comment on this is, like, especially with this and Subtlety having flash, I think the far more common use case here is in the Stoneblade deck that I mentioned on this very episode 1 segment ago, where you play Stonefall Mystic, you search up your sword, and you don't even care if your thing dies, because later on, you're going to have good bodies to equip just for free. That's priced in, and you're going to have stuff like Spell Queller in your deck, which casts either of these free spells, or Teferi, Time Raveler, which casts either of these free spells. It's just, like, that is the play pattern. It's just having everything you cast gobbled up by a Shriekmaw. It's not going to be your opponent breathing a sigh of relief because they answered your turn to Vengevine or Tarmogoyf or something.
Yeah, at least Force a Negation, when you draw it, is always just a negate. Like, it's not going bigger than a negate. It's not doing more. It's not, like, burying your opponent and flickering repeated card advantage. It's just a negate.
Yeah, but that's all I got for my list. Hopefully the rest of yours has something more fun to talk about.
Okay, we'll start with the most fun card. Goblin Bombardment. 1 in a red, sacrifice a creature, deal a damage to anything. Pretty simple. And my only comment is you should trawl through Sam Black's article archives. And if you don't understand why Goblin Bombardment is such a huge deal relative to the other versions of this, this style of sacrifice outlet, the big thing is that it's the same thing as Lava Dart, where, like, if you just play a Goblin Bombardment deck against a deck with small creatures, you just, like, clean up their stuff and they're done. But also it's just, like, a ton of damage. But, like, that's not, people have done the ton of damage thing. The unique part is just, like, picking off creatures and just, like, really being this huge attrition card.
I do feel like a hypocrite of sorts for coming in here and repeatedly talking about the stifling effect that cards like Lava Dart are having on the format, and then celebrating this one being added to the card pool. But maybe that ship has sailed, and we're meant to just fully embrace having stuff like this lying around. But yeah, I'm not even going to put the bid in to get to write about this one this week, because I know Sam is going to want to write about it, and I know the people out there are going to want Sam to write about it. So I'm going to give the people what they want.
Yeah, no, just love to see it. It's the decks that if this is good in Modern, that's a good thing, because it involves, like, playing creatures and, like, moving things in and out of your graveyard over multiple turns.
Yeah, this is the incentive for an actual sacrifice deck, where that is the point now, and you're not just sacrificing stuff en route to doing other things. This is the payoff that those kind of decks were looking for, where, yeah, you can, play a Stitcher Supplier and then play your second land, return a Bloodghast and play this, and then you really are off to the races. You are now doing the thing. And I think that is a good thing to be able to do in Modern by and large. The other thing as well is, if you have one of these infinite loops set up, whether it's Vesperlark or any of the Persist plus, like, Grumgully, Metallic Mimic style stuff, this is the free sacrifice outlet that also directly kills your opponent and doesn't give them any time to recover.
Yeah, just a great card. Also love to see Arcbound Mauser. This is a white for a artifact creature with lifelink and modular 1. That it's just pretty straightforward. I think it's even a cat, and I'm more of a dog person, but I accept it being a cat in this spot. Just great. Love to see that we can play, every single Arcbound worker we would ever want. Like it went from we can only play 4 to we can play 4 worker, 4 Mauser, 4 Zavaz the Wasp. I don't know. But this is
yeah.
Just a total
This one is
reroll.
so clean.
Yeah.
It's so clean compared to whatever the hell Zabaz was. This is just nice, straightforward, good, honest Magic. And honestly, this is a card we evaluate in the context of hardened scales. This actually gives me more of a affinity vibe where, like, against any kind of racing situation, just suiting up your Vault Scourge with the cranial plating was good times. And in the scales decks now, just dumping a bunch of counters via other modular creatures or the Ozolith or whatever it is on this and just having a 6/6, like, you're not racing that. You deal with that or you lose the game.
Yeah, and also green-white is Horizon Canopy. So, yeah, I just love to see it. I'm going to have to do a nice little gatherer search for all the white cards I would want in hardened scales. And I've got one last card here. One last card.
Okay.
And it's a simple one-liner, and I want you to get ready with an answer. And I want to see people tweet their answer at me as well. It's Jade Avenger. Okay, it's 1 and a green for a 2/2 Bushido 2. My question is among the Magic community, is Frog from Chrono Trigger or Chub Toad more iconic?
I think it might be Frog from Chrono Trigger, honestly. I think there's like a tier of Giga Boomers where Chub Toad is unimpeachable, and then for anyone younger than that, I suppose, I think Chrono Trigger is, if not the best game of that kind of console generation, at least in the top tier for sure. And I think that by itself is going to carry the day there.
See, this is the problem with the Super Nintendo, is because there's just 5 games that are the best game on the Super Nintendo, and there's no way to argue it. They're just all the best. But yeah, that's the end of my list there.
Yeah, so what do you make, if you had to give a kind of top-down, big-picture judgment of this batch of previews on the whole, what's the verdict here?
This is a lot of I think I'm going to ignore the cards that I don't like, the 5 of them that I haven't seen them all. I think this is just all great. I think they're doing their job flawlessly on like every aspect in terms of like tournament play nostalgia, flavor nostalgia, like missed opportunities in the past, giving people more of what they want for all of the tier 2 to 3 archetypes, but like very specific role filling. Just chucking in like cards that are just eye grabbing, but like doing it in ways that aren't, it's not like, oh, I have to read like this card and I cannot believe that Hogak exists. It's just like, oh, this is just like weird and I did not expect to see this on a card, but it all makes sense the third time I read it. I think that it's just kind of, 5 cards aside, my expectations for this set are that it's going to be flawless.
Yeah, there is so much stuff that we didn't even mention in this quick hit. So, the cycle of artifact dual lands that come in tapped, but like that's a really interesting twist on that never would have occurred to me, or just some of these role players that we're getting for the first time, like Seal of Removal, Seal of Cleansing, just some of the weirdo cards as well that I'm just excited to play with, even if I have an inkling they're not going to be good, but I'm really excited to put the time into finding out. So much of the set really appeals to me, and I feel like a kid on Christmas Day during the spoiler season, and I'm just hoping not to come in here and have my excitement ruined by any of those spoilers. But for now, some offenders aside, I'm really jazzed for what I'm seeing so far.
Yeah. I think it just like every day I look at the cards that I didn't like the previous day, aside from 5, again, and I just get more excited about them. Like Brainstone, like it was a really awkward first reveal because it's like weirdly disappointing, but like looking at it, it's like, oh, it does so many things and it tells a joke. Love to see it.
Yeah, there were so many cards in this set where if they were like the flagship card of the set, if they were the first reveal, if they were the thing that was on the packaging and so on, then they would kind of summarize the vibe of the set, but they also would only be scratching the surface at the same time. Yeah.
Really good job on all of the work that the creative and flavor team are just doing a bang-up job.
Yeah, and you can tell from certainly Brad's article and the various tweets from the people who had a chance to work on the set. This really was a labor of love, and a lot of them, this is the whether they were a consultant and this was their design career, or they've been in the business for decades and this isn't their first rodeo. You can tell this is a highlight of their career, however long or short that may have been.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, you ready to kick it off to the nonsense of the week, which is probably less nonsensical than some of the cards that we just talked about?
But only a little bit. And yes, I sure am. So we'll send you to a short break and then come back with some Modern Horizons 1 inspired nonsense of the week.
What's up, everybody? Cedric Phillips here, stopping by real quick to let you know about one of Star City Games' newest podcasts, The Receivables, hosted by yours truly, alongside my partner in crime, of course, Patrick Sullivan, where the two of us discuss Magic sets, both past and present, from top to bottom. On every episode of The Receivables, you're going to hear us talk about the facts of a set, the mechanics of a set, the cycles of a set, the boring stuff, before we get into some crazy stories of when we were playing Magic during the times that the set was legal. We've got a ridiculous award show where we give out awards like the Char Rumbler Award for weirdest card in a set, the Oko Thief of Crowns Award for best card in the set, and a whole bunch more. Before we finally decide, hey, what card won the set and what letter grade should we give the set? It's a whole lot of fun. We're having a blast recording them. Hopefully you have the opportunity to listen to it and you enjoy it as much as we're enjoying recording them. Where can you find it? StarCityGames.com or wherever else you listen to your podcast. The Receivables every single week here at SCG.
Okay, and we are back for our nonsense of the week, which we are doing something a little different this week. I have not told Ari what the nonsense is. I have just assured him that I have some. And I imagine he will not be disappointed, although I feel like if you have seen the deck list that I'm about to show you, you know exactly what this is, because there is no other plausible candidate for what this could be.
Okay, fire away.
Okay, I will send the link for this to you right now and let you digest this and react in real time, because this is this one belongs in the Louvre. This is a true masterpiece. I don't know if we can ever top this for this segment. This is the nonsense of the week, the nonsense of the year, the nonsense of the rest of humanity. Feast your eyes on this, which I have just sent to you in the Slack there.
Wait, does this beat Titantron?
Oh, Titantron is a normal, unremarkable deck compared to this.
Okay, so this is okay. I see what we're doing. This is the Sorin Imperious Bloodlord Morophon deck. So Morophon is the 7-mana changeling mythic from original Modern Horizons that makes your spells of whatever creature type you choose for it cost Wooburg less, and you use that to cast the first Sliver and Cascade. And from there, I feel like there's something I should figure out from here in terms of actually winning the game.
So, we have our Sorin. So that's the 2 and a black Sorin that can. One of its minus abilities is just to put a vampire from your hand onto the battlefield, which normally you see people doing that with like Champion of Dusk in Pioneer or whatever. We're aiming much higher here. So we're putting in our vampire and everything else in Morophon. So that's our sneak and show. That's how we're cheating out our 7-mana card on the cheap. And once we have that, so we cast the first sliver. This is Wooburg for a 7/7 sliver. It has Cascade, and then also sliver spells that you cast have Cascade. And so we pair this with some other 5-mana rainbow slivers, Sliver Legion, which pumps all of your slivers, I want to say quadratically, but don't quote me on that. And then Sliver Hivelord, which gives them more indestructible. We've got Cloud Shredder Sliver for the big combat step after all of this. But the way this works is, so we have, in terms of our setup, because we've got this 2.5 card combo to put up here, we have Summoner's Pact and Eladamri's School to find our first sliver. We also have Search for Glory. So this is the 3-mana snow sorcery tutor from Kaldheim that gets a snow permanent, a legendary card, or a saga. So in this deck, it gets any of those combo pieces or your snow basics, if you're in dire need of those. And we also have Oath of Nissa, which, again, can find a land, can find any of the combo pieces. So when we're going off, let's say we have a first sliver and we cast Sliver Legion. So we're cascading through our deck. We can hit Summoner's Pact, which finds another green sliver to keep the chain going. We can find Eladamri's School, which finds a sliver to keep the chain going. Same thing with Search for Glory. We also have 4 copies of Remand in the deck, which normally you would think, okay, that's a fine defensive card, but buys you time, gets the combo together, maybe a little bit out of place there. But when you're cascading, when you're surfing that wave, if you cascade into a Remand, you just remind your spell, which has Cascade, thanks to the first sliver, and you keep going. And if you hit a sliver at any point, that cascades into something else, which can find you another sliver. So the only misses in the deck, really, at that point are your additional copies of Sorin. And so you quickly get to a point where any of the 2-drop slivers that you cast are guaranteed to cascade into Summoner's Pact, which finds you another sliver, let's say a first sliver, a sliver legion, which you can cast for free thanks to Marathon. And so you basically just cascade, 10 times in a turn. Everything gets you this additional backdoor cascade, and then you have this big photo finish with Cloud Shredder Sliver when all is said and done.
Okay, then. I do like how you can cast. I guess there aren't a lot of 3-drop slivers, but you could cascade into Harmonic Sliver, then cascade into Remand off the Harmonic Sliver, and then bounce the top level Wooburg Sliver. That's a lot.
Yes. It sure is.
When you cast a first sliver while you control a first sliver, you get double cascade, right?
Oh, yeah. You sure do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess you can also unearth your slivers with J-Shape Sliver, which doesn't cast them, but you can work that angle as well. Some cute features at a micro level, for this deck. Going over to the mana base, we have in order here, Cavern of Souls into Gemstone Caverns into Gemstone Mine. So not often that you see all of those working in tandem. And then we have exactly one Reflecting Pool. So just make up the numbers for our blue sources and our white sources and all the other sources at the same time. But also, we have some fetch lands, of course, and so you would think, well, we got to balance 5 colors in our mana base. Maybe we need like a triome of some kind. So Indatha Triome, the Abzan Triome, maybe that's a good fit here. This deck has a Murmuring Bosk because we have Marathon as a tree folk in addition to everything else, and so sometimes we just get to untap that one and have it be the best dual land / pain land of all time.
Yeah, it took me a second on that one, and when I got the joke, it's definitely a groaner.
So this deck is quite something, and as Brian Gottlieb pointed out with his hypothetical, 20 pitch evoke creatures plus 20 rainbow creature deck on Twitter, this deck has a lot of creatures of all 5 colors if we want to work any of those into the mix here as well.
I do like Search for Glory. That does make me happy to see. That's all I really have to say about this. Is quite the spread, honestly. I saw this deck. I couldn't figure out if there was a deterministic win. And now that we're talking about it again, maybe they just didn't want to win the game. They just wanted to see what happens.
That's what adds to the fun. You could not be able to close and then lose the game to your several copies of Summoner's Pact that you surely cast across this turn.
Yeah, you can't really pay for a lot of those with only 23 lands. I love the Oath of Nisa in your deck that has like perfect 5-color mana.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it can fix you for your Sorin, if you have every other color, but you're missing the black source somehow.
Yeah, you probably cast it off Mana Confluence anyways. Like, it's a tough ask.
Yeah, there literally is a lot to unpack in this deck, but I don't know when I'll find time to give this a try, but I really want to, because how could you turn this one down?
You probably will after the first time you cascade into Sorin, but, that only happens some of the time.
There's a very narrow window to do this before my first sliver can run into Subtlety or something after I've Summoner's Pacted for it. But for now, I can have some fun.
Well, Cascade doesn't matter for Subtlety. Bloodbraid Elf is pretty good against that card.
I guess. And sometimes you just cast your first sliver and give them the beatdowns.
Yeah, that is true. It is a 7/7.
I don't quite know why 2 copies of Shimmer of Possibility are in this deck. I don't know if this deck wants an impulse or if that's somehow the best one that we can find across all 5 colors in the modern card pool here.
Yeah, no, it literally is. I've had this discussion recently in the context of Curate, and the best impulse is the Sorcerer Speed impulse. Maybe the next set will fix that. Who knows? Maybe we can get impulse again.
look, Once Upon a Time did no harm to anyone. So, let that one out of its cage and see what happens.
Absolutely. I mean, I will say that of the cards that were banned from that set across any format, I think Once Upon a Time in Modern may have been the least offensive.
Well, that's a spirited discussion to have for another day, maybe. But on that note, in the meantime, any last notes and where can people be finding you?
You will certainly not be finding me at ARMLX on Magic Online playing this deck, though you will find me probably playing a number of other things on Magic Online doing that. I'm also ARMLX on Twitter. My content shows up typically Mondays on StarCityGames.com. You are listening to this podcast, which you can find on Spotify, YouTube, StarCityGames.com, Stitcher, probably somewhere in your microwave, wherever you find a podcast.
Yes, you can find me under an alias casting the first sliver and then the second sliver and third sliver and so on and so forth. You can find me on Twitter instead, if that's your jam, at Dominaria. And we will be back, I guess, as of this recording, on Thursday with spoilers that may or may not crack open the Modern format. And if not, we will be back next week with more Modern Horizons 2 and certainly more Nonsense of the Week. Take care.